A strong stench of cheap liquor and armpit emanated from this trash protagonist, but all of this was due to a great tragedy that occurred in his life. And the tragedy wasn't running out of shower water, and of course he'll soon turn his life around. But hold your horses, my friend. His parents had gone to a better place because of a criminal organization and Truck Kun. But the boozer wasn't just anyone. He was an awakened one with brutal powers and had spent 5 years as a mercenary abroad, which made him lose a bit of his humanity. So when he returns home, his parents had been buried by a criminal organization of awakened ones. That doesn't smell right to me. Our protagonist named Ken will use all his military knowledge and his powers inherited from the gods to destroy everything and everyone involved in this problem. He's going to infiltrate the organization and take them out one by one. He won't care about gender.
Good night, girl. I'll see you tomorrow.
A phone rings. A young woman rushes out, putting on her shoes as she walks. Her badge identifies her as Oa Miyahara, a reporter. Aoi runs out of the building. She still needs to buy her ticket. At the Tokyo bus terminal, the reporter's bus awaits. Morning to early afternoon tickets are all sold out. Fortunately, the young woman managed to buy the last available ticket to her destination, a rather luxurious seat for a bus. The journalist looks to the side with a hint of disdain. Sitting next to her is a guy who looks like a homeless man. She laments that of all the places, she ended up here. Annoyed, the woman wonders what this guy's deal is. Aoi smells alcohol coming from the man. Worse yet, his clothes are so filthy that he's probably dirtying the seat. From the way he's sleeping, it seems like the homeless man spent the whole night drinking. The reporter even covers her nose because of the man sitting next to her. Aoi takes her earpods out of her bag and starts listening to music to try and distract herself from the unpleasant presence. The man continues sleeping peacefully. Aoi also gets drowsy. She's been having a bad day since she woke up. The young woman ends up falling asleep while listening to music. What she didn't expect was just how much worse her day could still get. From the darkness of sleep, Aoi wakes up being thrown forward. One of her earbuds flies off and hits the floor. People around her are screaming. The woman tries to understand what's happening. She heard a loud crash as she woke. Frightened, Aoi wonders what the hell is going on. Around her are people collapsed, the bus windows shattered, and the curtains covered in ketchup. The view ahead is total chaos. The bus is in ruins and the floor painted red. The driver hit his head on the wheel and blacked out. Outside, we see that the bus crashed on a mountain curve and is now hanging off a cliff. Aoi, struggling, tries to unbuckle the seatbelt strapped across her waist. The seatbelt finally releases. But the bus, barely hanging on, starts to shift. The ground beneath the vehicle crumbles and the bus plunges downward. The reporter is now in freefall. Her expression shows pure desperation. She screams, her hands reaching out, unable to grab onto anything. The young woman wonders if this is really how she's going to die when a hand comes to her rescue. Before the reporter could fall, the hand grabs her by the belt. Surprised, Aoi looks up at her savior. It's none other than our homeless man, Ken, with one hand on the bus and the other gripping the woman entirely by the belt, which must be leather. His long, unkempt hair covers his face, except for a cold stare. Aoi is in shock from the chain of events. Shaking, the journalist recognizes the homeless man. She grabs Ken's forearm, which is bigger than both her hands. Shaken, Aoi thanks the protagonist for saving her life. With no time to answer, the homeless Ken realizes the bus's situation is getting worse. He notices a broken window. He seizes the moment and throws the woman, still mid-thank you, through the window. She's stunned and goes flying. As Ken falls with the bus, the woman flies in the opposite direction. Aoi lands hard on her back in the grass. She complains that the homeless guy threw her out of nowhere. But just then, the bus still falling explodes, causing the reporter to let out a small scream. Still with her arms raised to shield her face, the reporter watches the scene. Aoi becomes worried, realizing there were still people on the bus. The vehicle keeps tumbling down the slope. The journalist can only watch in disbelief. Now with nothing holding it back, the bus is in freefall toward the water. At first, the sea swallows the bus whole. But soon, the tip of the vehicle reemerges on the surface. Among the water and rocks, a small part of the transport can still be seen. Up on the mountain road, a crowd is already gathering, always eager to witness a disaster. The crash that sent the bus off the edge was so bad it involved over 10 cars, both lanes. And the girl is completely stranded on a rock. Aoi's jaw drops as she realizes something. The man who saved her was the homeless guy sitting beside her. As she remembers, the reporter mourns all the lives lost. She spends a moment leaning on the rock, trying to calm herself, but a scream pulls her out of her thoughts. The kids at the top, watching the tragedy, point out that there are survivors. In disbelief, Aoi moves to the edge to check. Someone is climbing out through the bus's windshield. The protagonist appears, carrying someone on his back. Aoi can't believe what she's seeing. Ken braces with one knee and is almost completely out of the bus. The sight gives the reporter an idea. She pulls out her phone from her pocket and decides to live stream the disaster. With just one click, she goes live. In real time, she starts an emergency broadcast. Her diverse audience begins to tune in. Aoi informs the viewers about the accident. Since she's streaming directly from the official channel of the show she works for, there are soon a lot of people watching. The journalist shows the condition of the bus in the water. As she points the camera at the vehicle, Aoi provides details about the trip. A head can be seen coming out of the windshield again. Broadcasting Ken rescuing people live, she describes him as a hero. The protagonist rises once more from the floating vehicle. The kids watch him go wild. The chat is completely flooded with comments. On the stream, we see the hero emerging with 5 people, as if taking them out for a stroll. However, the protagonist's expression shows no emotion. Ken spots a rock close to the vehicle. He manages to jump while holding everyone. Aoi doesn't take the camera off him for even a second when a notification appears. Her boss asks her what the hell this emergency broadcast is about. She keeps filming as he continues sending messages, questioning her whereabouts. Completely ignoring her boss, who says this isn't the time to broadcast an accident, the journalist continues the live stream. Aoi pulls a tablet out of her bag that, by some miracle, is still working. The tablet is not only functional but doesn't even have a scratch. The reporter sends a message back to her boss saying she doesn't have time to stop filming and will explain later. Other staff members from the show get frustrated, not understanding what's going on. The newsroom staff argue among themselves about what to do. Everyone seems very busy at the moment. In the background, a technician at the soundboard turns up the volume on Aoi's live feed. The broadcast started by Aoi continues live. Screams from the kids watching the accident make the reporter jump. Aoi grabs the phone off the rock to continue the stream. The side of the bus is now visible. The vehicle spins in the water like a crocodile. The current starts driving the bus toward 2 rocks. Ken watches as the vehicle is carried away. However, one rescued woman is being held by 2 people because she's too distraught. The woman screams, inconsolable, that her son was still on the bus and that saving her alone meant nothing if he wasn't saved too. The bus fully submerges into the water. For a moment, Ken assesses the situation. The hero looks at the rain as if considering something. Then he charges toward the water. Ken Yanagimoto dives headfirst into the waves. The reporter finally realizes that the hero is the same man who saved her. Ken swims toward the sunken vehicle. Underwater, the protagonist opens his eyes. Activating his powers, the hero's eyes begin to glow. The interior of the bus takes on a faint blue light. Seeing through the wreckage, Ken searches for the boy. Soon the protagonist locates the child. The boy is unconscious among the bus debris. Ken swims toward the child. He grabs one of the metal bars pinning the victim. Using his powers, the hero removes the wreckage from on top of the boy. Ken pulls the boy out of danger. Holding the child in his arms, the hero looks down at the unconscious victim. Now carrying the child, the protagonist swims out of the sunken bus. However, the vehicle keeps sinking and the situation becomes more dangerous. Ken notices the shifting around him and looks around. The hero realizes that now both of them are in danger. Glowing with power, the protagonist shields the boy as debris crashes in the direction of the sinking bus. Outside, the reporter watches the situation, concerned. She's still filming with her phone, wondering if Ken hasn't surfaced because he's trapped in the bus. A bright yellow glow appears in the waves. Everyone around is shocked by a massive explosion in the water, sending bus debris flying. The child's mother watches in despair. Tears well up in her eyes as she thinks of her son left on the bus. A man holds the mother back as she tries to throw herself into the water after her son, begging them to let her go. Against everyone's expectations, a hand emerges from the water. The hand of our hero grips a rock tightly. In an instant, Ken pulls himself up, child in arms. The woman is stunned and relieved her son was rescued. The mother hugs the boy, who by some miracle has already opened one eye. The protagonist watches their reunion without showing any emotion. Thousands of people watch the scene via the emergency broadcast. The chat goes wild over the heroic act of the mysterious man. Finally, the fire department arrives along with first responders. Everyone who witnessed the situation up close or through the broadcast now sees Ken as a great hero. Rays of sunlight begin to break through the clouds darkened by the rain. News sites speculate that the 12-vehicle accident was caused by organized crime. The fatalities from the crash reached 200 people. The public started showing interest in the incident, though not truly grasping the scale of what happened. The story was announced on Tokyo's morning news and public safety began to be questioned. However, some journalistic pieces kept the spotlight on the new public hero. Modern society's attention was focused on the mysterious man who saved people from the bus that fell off the coastal road. Several days later, inside a building, a certain employee was getting chewed out. Inside the studio, the boss's speech continued. Aoi patiently listened to her boss complain about how irresponsible the emergency broadcast had been. The girl was surprised by how concerned her coworkers had been about her. The reporter's boss told her that everyone was extremely anxious because she had been caught in the middle of the accident. Aoi is moved when she hears from her superior that it's all fine now since she's safe and sound. However, the journalist couldn't escape having to write a formal apology letter. Just as Aoi was about to leave, her boss made it clear that the only reason she got off with just a letter was because the broadcast was a huge success. After being sent back to work, the reporter began to wonder whether the mysterious hero was okay. She had even asked the paramedics about the man, but he had vanished without a trace. Assigned to cover stories about Tokyo's anonymous hero, Aoi was determined to thank him. That's when the reporter had the idea to try to land an interview with her savior. Elsewhere, our hero was busy with other matters. Ken was on a call with a man named Herms. Herms answered the phone saying he didn't expect to get a call from the people's hero. The protagonist cut him off, telling him to quit with the nicknames. Herms asked if he could then call him Hero Ken Yanagimoto. Ken, out of patience, replied that he didn't call to chit-chat. The man on the other end laughed, saying he was just joking, and asked the hero what he needed. Ken informed him he was looking for someone. Another day begins in the great city of Tokyo. On the walls, a poster announces the search for the mysterious people's hero. The paper taped to the wall shows a photo of the protagonist at the scene where he rescued the bus passengers. Inside the broadcasting offices, chaos reigns. Numerous prank calls come into staff phones, lying about who the hero is. Sitting down, Oi regrets starting the search for the mysterious man. The journalist reflects on how many fake news stories are circulating. Various people online are cosplaying and pretending to be the people's hero. Things change when a small number appears on the screen. A notification catches Oi's attention. It's from an older colleague of the reporter. The woman hurriedly announces she needs to leave the office for a bit, grabs her bag, and rushes out. Her coworkers wonder where she's going at a time when everyone is so busy. One colleague tries to call out to the woman, already gone, without noticing what was on her monitor screen. A white car crosses the city. The vehicle speeds down an empty road. Inside the car, Oa is on a phone call. She says she's the person who received a message earlier and continues driving out of the city. A sign up ahead indicates the cemetery is just to the right. The vehicle is now parked. On the phone, the photo shows the much sought-after hero sitting beside a gravestone with several sake bottles. The man who took the photo identifies himself as Takeru Akiyama. Takeru had been at the cemetery a few months ago when a man in strange clothes appeared beside a grave. The journalist reports that after making an offering, the man bought a lot of alcohol. Oa goes to the gravestone where the hero was supposedly seen. The woman closely inspects the place. While searching on her phone, the reporter remembers that the informant said the grave was made in June. Oa recalls the smell of alcohol coming from the guy who had been sitting beside her, along with the mud on his pants and shoes. The journalist feels regret as she realizes the person sitting next to her wasn't a vagabond, but a young man in mourning. Turning to Takeru, the woman asks if he knows whose grave it is. Determined to find the protagonist, Aoi also asks who is responsible for the family. Even on TV, the anchor announces the search for the people's hero. The extremely vibrant city is filled with ads and posters looking for the mysterious man. Despite all the publicity, Ken walks unnoticed through the streets, now wearing regular clothes. With his hair cut and beard shaved, the protagonist has regained his youthful appearance, worried that the people looking for him might have noticed his powers. The young man thinks about how much he would like to bring down organized crime, but his body isn't in top shape. Ken had set a trap to lure the criminals. The protagonist concluded that this would be safer for him. After much investigation, the young man knew that the organized crime group had a very wealthy sponsor. With a particular man in mind, Ken came up with the perfect excuse to make the criminal come after him. The young man had a clear objective in attracting the criminal's attention. If the criminals came looking for him, he might find clues about the whereabouts of Mei Yanajimoto. Ken strolls casually through a familiar place. A cry for help startles the protagonist. The hero starts looking around frantically. Then he stops, staring into the distance. Satisfied, Ken speaks to himself, thanking someone for letting him find this. On a dark street, several shady guys in suits are gathered. The men are hanging out at the tunnel exit, some smoking, others chatting. Farther off, a group of teens is gathered near a sports car. One of the kids asks the other how last night's party was. The second kid replies he sold the girl because he got tired of her. On the ground are needles and suspicious little bags. Some guys partied so hard they look completely drained. In the back seat of one of the cars nearby, a girl is lying down. The girl wakes up and hears the conversation outside. A sharp-faced teen tells the girl that they have lots of fun with girls like her. The kid grabs her face and brings a vape close, saying it's expensive and won't be free. The girl shuts her eyes in fear. Before he can force her to use the vape, the thug is startled by one of his buddies yelling. The kid with the vape looks around to see what's going on. A guy with his hands in his pockets is walking toward the criminals gathering. Our boy Ken scans the thugs around him. The criminals are very confident, looking at the young man like he's crazy. From a distance, the kid is still holding the girl's face, watching the scene. Ken smiles at the men and calls them trash. The protagonist approaches, telling the scumbags they're just piles of filth who can't control themselves. Facing a pissed-off thug head-on, the hero says that everyone there is nothing but a bunch of cowards. The already angry thug gets even angrier. He punches Ken in the face with all his strength. Wanting to teach the young man a lesson, the guy keeps landing punches, one after another. Some of the thugs watching from a distance laugh at the sight of the kid getting beat up. Since Ken didn't even fight back, the attacker asks where all that tough talk from earlier went. Unharmed, the hero grabs the man's fist midair. The young man applies pressure while holding the guy's hand. The thug screams in pain as if his hand is being crushed. Around them, the criminals grow agitated at the situation. Another thug tries to attack Ken from behind. The protagonist quickly adjusts his stance and kicks the second guy right where it hurts. The dude drops instantly, paralyzed with pain. From the force of the kick, the thug goes flying and slams against the wall like a rag doll. Collapsed, the guy is already unconscious. Ken looks around to see who's next. Since no one moves, he starts walking toward the gathering he just ruined. Confident, the protagonist tells the thugs he's only defending himself since they hit him first. Getting no answer, a hero asks again if they understood that this fight is happening because of them. The thugs become furious at the young man's audacity. As a mob, the cowards charge toward the young man. Ken, however, is excited by the opponent's initiative. This was exactly what he wanted. The first guy comes in fast, ready to punch. Ken dodges the blow and the guy stumbles past. The young man grabs his head before he gets away and slams him hard onto the ground. The second thug comes from behind with a small knife. With no difficulty, the young man dodges the attack. Everything happens very fast. Ken slaps the guy across the face and sends him flying. The guy shoots off like a bowling ball and knocks down the other thugs like a strike. The rowdy teens start realizing something weird is going on. You can clearly see a commotion happening across the dark street. One of the boys turns to a shadowy figure and asks him to take care of the situation. The deformed, devilish-looking guy says he's on it. The devil walks forward, thinking that whoever's causing this chaos must be tough. But when the ugly guy arrives, he's completely shocked. At the mysterious young man's feet lies the last fallen goon. Ken casually dusts off his clothes. All the thugs sprawl on the ground. The devil calls out to the protagonist and asks who the hell he is. Without even turning around, the young man replies that he's just a passerby. Facing the newly arrived thug, Ken says the party was too loud, so they came to see what was going on. Walking toward the protagonist, the devil tells him to quit acting cocky. The thug charges full speed at the young man. Once again, the young man simply dodges the punch. Ken retaliates with a kick to the guy's ribs that makes him bend. Before the devil can fly, the hero reaches out his hand and grabs the thug, holding him up by the head. Totally pissed, Ken prepares his finishing move. He punches the guy in the face so hard he flies off farther than Teen Rocket. The devil crashes back first into the wall where the teens are and they're left speechless, wondering who the heck this guy is. Still watching the scene, the boys see the thug's body slump lifelessly to the ground. Still in shock, the rich kids start to react. One of them picks up an empty bottle from the party. The teens charge at the stranger in a group. Calm and collected, the young man stands still, waiting for the approaching enemies. Once Ken sees they're close enough, he lands an uppercut on the first guy's chin, followed by a slap across the second guy's face, a foot to the ear for the third, and finally a solid smack on the fourth. The young man pauses to see if anyone's going to get back up. Nothing. Behind the protagonist, strong lights flash on, catching him off guard. When the hero turns to look, a car is heading straight at him. At the wheel is the vape kid. The terrified teen slams the accelerator. Our young man doesn't seem to care and stays put in front of the car. At high speed, the vehicle closes in fast on the protagonist. Ken looks at the car like it's a scooter. The young man stops the car with just one foot, crushing the front and creating a deafening crash. The vape kid smashes face first into the windshield. With his eyes glowing, the protagonist looks excited. He's finally found his target. Ken charges straight at the driver. He sticks his hand into the car, yanks the kid out by the collar, and rips him from the vehicle, smashing everything in the way. The kid flies and crashes into the ground. Shaking like a scared puppy, the thug looks at the young man approaching. The vape kid starts apologizing without even knowing why. Smiling darkly, Ken approaches his target, telling him not to worry. With an empty, soulless stare, the protagonist tells the little thug he's not going to die. The girl who refused the vape wakes up startled. Above her, she sees no ceiling, just the sky and a few metal beams. The victim gets up quickly upon recognizing the place. A hooded figure nearby asks if she's finally awake. The girl asks the guy with his back turned who he is. The young man tells her to keep quiet and stay put, because he's just about done with what he's doing. Then he turns to Yosuke, the trembling kid, and asks if he agrees with him. Ken tells Yosuke to hand over his phone, and the kid just nods and gives it. The protagonist confirms with the thug if his name is Yosuke Mita. The boy confirms immediately. Our young man, wanting to dig deeper, asks the kid what his father does for a living. Yosuke says his father is a member of parliament, and Ken thinks that so far everything matches the investigation. The young man kneels beside the rich kid and asks him if his dad knows he's a thug. No answer. On the phone screen, we see a call being made to the kid's father. The parliament member answers, asking his son where he's been and if he knows what time it is. Our hero, with the phone to his ear, listens to the full scolding the father gives the kid. Ken calls out to the man on the other end of the line, who sounds confused. The protagonist keeps talking and asks the father if he knows what his son has been involved in. Ken starts listing the crimes Yosuke is connected to, telling his father that since the rich kid was caught red-handed, he's looking at a minimum of 10 years in prison. Additionally, the young man tells the parliament member that there's evidence from the cameras of all the luxury cars around. The confused man asks if Ken is with the police. The protagonist replies that he's just a passerby, but his son and his friends put him through awful things. Shoving the phone to Yosuke, our guy smiles and says he wants compensation, since it was the thugs who started everything. On the other end, the kid's father asks if that's true. Defeated, the playboy simply apologizes to his dad. To top it off, Ken tells the man that on top of everything else, there's footage of Yosuke trying to run him over while drunk, and both the dealer and the victim are witnesses. The parliamentarian asks him how much money he wants. Our guy says he wants about 4 million Rias and a written promise not to harm the victim. The father goes mad and asks if he's joking. The protagonist replies by asking if the man wants him to start a live stream of what's happening. After a moment of silence, the parliamentarian starts bargaining, offering 2 million. Ken asks him to pick a title for the live stream. Desperate, Yosuke's father threatens the young man, saying he won't get away with this either, and that they should settle it peacefully. Ken makes it clear that he knows with the politician's status, he can manipulate the media and erase the videos. So this was the fastest way to solve it. The old man complains that his son only brings him trouble. The protagonist tells him to stop whining and give an answer already. Defeated, the politician agrees to the compensation terms, offering to pay in an untraceable way and promising to leave the victim alone. Ken responds enthusiastically, saying they finally agree, and gives the old man an address to meet him at 6 a.m. Quickly, the young man throws Yosuke's phone back to the ground. The hero finally turns to the girl and apologizes for making her wait. Ken tells the victim he understands she must want to go home, but if she leaves now, she'll have nightmares for the rest of her life. Then the young man tells her that to get rid of fear, she has to eliminate the source of the problem. Sometime later, the sun rises and men step out of the silver car. Our hero thinks problems should be dealt with the same day so that tomorrow peace can exist in the mind. Ken receives the money bag and opens it to look inside. The bag is full of thick stacks of cash. The young man tosses the money bag to the girl. The girl stares at the bag in shock, unable to believe what's happening. She thanks the hero, who asks her how she ended up in that situation and tells her there's no need to thank him. When the girl starts to protest, he tells her he didn't help out of goodwill. Either way, the victim tells him that to her, he's a savior. The protagonist tells her he's not a hero. He's just a delinquent passing through. Elsewhere, a man slams his fist on a table in rage. Blinded by hatred, Yosuke's father swears he won't let this slide since the man who blackmailed him could ruin his political career. The old man makes a call to Yugo Mizukami, the one responsible for the downfall of the protagonist's adoptive father. Relaxing on a couch, the criminal answers the call, referring to the parliamentarian as Professor. On the other end of the line, the politician tells Yugo that he needs someone taken care of no matter what, and that the reward would be 2 million Rias in cash. The mobster replies that he'd like to know more about this story. Smiling, Yugo receives the politician's orders. A news report recounts the June incident in which a lone man saved multiple people from a fallen bus. A man watching the video on a tablet seems to recognize the mysterious hero and asks if it's really him. A nervous woman bites her nails and says that judging by the face and movements, it can only be him. With a dark look, a woman adds that more than anything, she remembers his aura. It's one of a kind. Another man slams the table in anger. He thought our hero had died in the war like Yasha. In the dark room, shady individuals wonder how he managed to survive. A red-eyed woman says there's no point in panicking now, reminding them that the reason for the meeting is to discuss the next steps. The man on the other side of the table says it's useless to report this to Kay. They'll have to deal with themselves. The red-eyed woman calls the group to attention. She asks a man in a light-colored suit behind her why he's still on the phone. Finishing the call, the man says he sent a goon to Congressman Maeda's house. Yugo Mizukami says apparently the old man's son got involved with some delinquents. Someone at the table asks since when the Seven Star Society deals with kids, but they are quickly cut off. Back on topic, the blue-eyed man asks what the others think Ken will do next. A guy with a yellow tie says he has no idea. Given his personality, the guy might just show up at the Seven Stars headquarters any second now. The girl, still biting her nails, says he's not foolish enough to do something that reckless. She explains that the protagonist is likely gathering extremely powerful allies. Her finger is bleeding from how much she's been biting her nails. As a new beautiful day begins, a woman rings the bell at the wide gate of a residence. From inside the house, a man begins to open the door. As Ken Miyajimoto appears from behind the gate, the woman says with determination that she finally managed to find him. The young man stares at the reporter, unsure of what to say. Ken asks the woman how she found this place, and she replies she had been there several times but could never find him. Looking all cool, our guy leans against the wall and asks what she wants, making it clear he's not interested in an interview. Aoi quickly gives in and tells him that's not why she came. Then the reporter starts to explain. She looks into his eyes and says she genuinely just wanted to say thank you. After a moment of silence, Ken remains surprised and Aoi looks embarrassed. The journalist asks to borrow the hero's phone, already snatching it from his hand. Poking around the device, the crazy girl asks why he saved her and didn't leave any way for her to contact him, as if that made any sense. Aoi stops when she notices something peculiar on the phone. Ken's phone divides people into 3 categories: those he calls, those who call him, and those he can ignore. The journalist examines his peculiar way of organizing contacts. Shamelessly, the woman adds her number to the 3rd group. Then Aoi looks at him and asks what the difference is between the group he calls and the one he answers. Taking the phone back, Ken replies that the difference is whether he made the call or not. The woman asks if that means the people he calls are important to him. The young man looks at her without answering. The reporter follows up, assuming that means the people who call him aren't important. A bit awkward. Ken says that's not quite it. Then he continues, saying that actually the 2nd group is made up of people he can afford to ignore. Aoi asks if she should change the group she put her number in, and the guy says it's fine as it is. Teasing her, the guy says it'd be a big mistake to ignore a call from someone who stopped everything they were doing just to visit him. The journalist blushes a little, appreciating Ken's smile. Then she smiles herself and offers to buy him a coffee as thanks. Sometime later, they're sitting across from each other in a cafe. always seems to be enjoying the conversation. A man watches the two from a car window. Seeing Ken in a good mood, the stalker concludes the world is indeed a wonderful place. The reason is that he recognized the young man sitting there as the people's hero. With contempt, the man in the car says that even a delinquent like him can flirt with a girl in a cafe. Ken walks the journalist to her taxi, always says goodbye and says she'll get in touch again. As the car drives off, she celebrates that she was able to thank him, buy him a coffee, and they even went for a walk. For a moment, the young woman pauses and reflects. Realizing she practically had a date with the guy, she smacks her face against the car window, making the taxi driver reflect on his own bad luck. Ken watches the car leave in a somewhat chaotic manner. Then the protagonist says out loud that he's been feeling a strange premonition for a while now. With a glance behind him, he asks the people standing there who they are. The stalker shows up, saying Ken doesn't need to worry, they're not suspicious people. Then the man shows his business card. His name is Kisukita, and he says he's from a private investigation agency. Our guy looks skeptically at the card, while the supposed detective starts talking about a case where students were assaulted. Kisuk, who just claimed not to be suspicious, asks him to cooperate in the shadiest way possible. Ken takes the card, saying the situation is unfortunate. With a smile even more suspicious than the suspicious detectives, the protagonist says of course he'll cooperate. Near a park, we overhear a conversation. Kesuk talks about how it's a terrible crime. The students claim they were attacked out of nowhere by a guy. Walking calmly beside the detective, the young man asks if maybe the students did something to deserve getting beaten. The detective stops walking when Ken continues, saying that not only did they deserve it, but they also pay lackeys to act like victims. Kisuk says that in this case, there's good news and bad news. He asks the young man if he knows what they are. Without waiting for an answer, the man continues. The good news is that his client asked him not to unalive the assailant. As the henchmen surround the young man, he still doesn't say what the bad news is. Out of nowhere, he draws and cocks a revolver. Pointing it at the protagonist, he says the bad news is that his chatter annoyed him. Ken doesn't flinch and says he has only one question. Kisuk tells him to go ahead and ask. The young man glances briefly around, and then asks the armed man if, by any chance, he already told his client he captured him. When one of the men says he hasn't told the client yet because he won't say anything until Ken is dead, the young man smiles in satisfaction. With eyes glowing, the protagonist confesses that this way is much more convenient. Kisuk instantly realizes he made a mistake. The detective starts firing desperately in the young man's direction. Ken dodges the bullets as if they're moving in slow motion while approaching Kisuk. In an instant, our hero, glowing with a golden aura, is face to face with the armed man. The detective curses into the air and steps back slightly. He immediately tries to land a blow, but the young man dodges easily. Ken grabs the man by the collar and throws him far like a paper airplane. The goons are shaken by their boss lying twisted on the ground. Then they decide to fight back. Each with a weapon, the thugs attack the young man in pairs. With glowing eyes, the protagonist just waits. Ken dodges while simultaneously grabbing the arm of the opponent holding a knife. The young man meets the guy in the family jewels. The poor guy nearly passes out and spits up nonsense. He drops the knife, so he probably blacked out. Ken catches the knife before it hits the ground. With a quick motion, he prepares to throw it. The blade grazes the face of henchman number 2. The guy definitely soiled himself. Wisely, henchman number 2 decides to give up before even trying. With all opponents down, the young man announces that he also has good and bad news for Kisuk. The protagonist crouches to pick up the gun, saying the good news is he wasn't planning to kill him. He cocks the gun and says the bad news. Smiling maliciously, he says that he still won't kill him. Ken asks what the guys plan to do now and begins a countdown. 1. The henchman unconscious on the ground. 2. The one completely in shock. 3. Kisukita himself. And then the only thing the 3 mercenaries could see was a black barrel. Moments later, the young man is still interrogating the thugs. In a threatening tone, Ken warns the henchmen that if they're trying to stall, it's a pointless effort. The young man turns to henchman number 2 and confirms if his name is Oris. Without waiting for an answer, Ken points at Oris and asks if maybe he can't hear because his ear is clogged. The young man's dark glare sends an unspoken message. Realizing what's about to happen, the henchman panics and begs the protagonist to wait a moment. With his finger already on the trigger, the hand ignores the man's pleas and fires. In the brightly lit park, only the man's screams can be heard. Henchman Oris is now single-eared. Kisuk watches his lackey freak out while dripping nonsense. Nervously, the fake private detective starts talking. Still on the ground, the man tells the young guy that he'll never show his face in front of him again. As part of his bargaining, Kisuk says he'll give all the money he was offered and even add more, but the young man cuts him off, saying it's not about the money. Ken extends his hand and asks for the criminal's phone, saying what he really needs is the contact info of the one who hired him. The thug panics and begs the young man to ask for anything else but that. Kisuk offers double the payment, but our hero doesn't care about money and tells the man he doesn't understand his situation. With eyes full of fear, the detective asks Ken if, by any chance, he knows who his client is. The young man simply moves toward the criminal with light steps. The protagonist stops in front of the man with an air of superiority and says he knows his client is the 7-Star Society. Kisuk is stunned that the young man knows this and asks how he found out. In a desperate attempt, the henchman says the Seven-Star Society isn't an enemy he can face alone. Being their enemy is being an enemy of the state. The organization controls not only the media, but also politics. On top of that, they have infinite wealth at their disposal. Even the country's president is nothing more than a pawn of the Seven Stars. No one can go head-to-head with the Seven, especially Executive Yugo Mizukami. While searching for something in his jacket, Kisuk tells the protagonist that not only will he never get revenge, but he'll have to flee the country. He extends his phone to the young man with a trembling hand, saying he'll introduce him to a face change specialist. Our hero couldn't care less. He scratches his ear and yawns while listening to the speech. Ken crouches next to the desperate man and says he even appreciates the advice, but he's not offering a deal or a negotiation. The young man explains simply that Kisuk's only option is to hand over the phone. As the cold metal touches Kisuk's face, a protagonist asks if maybe he's got a clogged ear too. Moving the barrel along the enemy's face, Ken says that to him it seems like all the henchmen have hearing problems. Quickly changing targets, the young man shows a sinister smile and asks if maybe the man's problem is with his eyes. With a revolver pressed against his own forehead, the criminal asks the young man what he plans to do. In response, the protagonist's smile turns even more twisted as he wonders if he needs to spell everything out for the guy on the floor. The three criminals sprint through the alleyways of the city, without stopping to breathe or rest. The group's leader glances behind to see if they're being followed. Upon confirming no one is chasing them, they begin to slow down, until finally, they stop running. The three men finally pause to rest and catch their breath. Keisu can't stop thinking about how the young man stole all this information. Interrupting the leader's thoughts, Oris suggests they simply tell the client the truth about what happened. His superior asks the fool if he has a death wish. The henchman who got sick and passed out says that even if they go back, they have nothing to show for it. Kisuk tells the other two that the area they're in is full of detective agencies, so ambushes and conflicts of interest are common. The criminals search around the city. They find an agency called the Detective Union. The leader tells Oris that his missing ear will serve as proof. The other henchman asks the boss if the guys at the Detective Union will back up their story, and Kisuk says of course not. Confused, the criminal asks how they're going to make the story believable then. The detective simply replies that they'll have to take them all out. Survival of the fittest, and that's that. The weak are oppressed, and only the strong have rights in this world. Meanwhile, Ken searches through the phone he stole from Kisuk. Tokyo wakes up to another beautiful day. The sun shines, birds sing. Inside a hospital room, two people meet. The doctor asks the young man if he has any chronic illness because he moves well for someone with a body in that condition. The young man replies that he had health problems during high school and asks if his condition is really that bad. Surprised, the doctor says that judging by his body, he would guess the young man is around 60 to 70 years old. Ken says he's used to hearing that he looks like an old man and asks the doctor if he's able to fight, receiving a negative answer. The healthcare professional tells the young man that if he punches someone, what's going to break isn't the enemy's face, it's his own hand. The doctor goes on to say that he has a problem in his left lung and there's a chance he has a chronic obstructive respiratory disease. Sitting down, the young man thinks about how his transformation, where all his cells are being replaced, is in its final stage, making him look sick. Kenan specifically chose a hospital under the control of the Seven Stars so they would believe he's weak. Our guy is satisfied with having set the perfect trap. Now he just has to wait. In the criminal underworld, a man with a yellow tie is carrying out a task. In his right hand, he holds a paper envelope. He reaches his destination and opens the door, letting light flood in. The man grabs the attention of the people in the dark room. Two seated individuals hear him say it's almost time for the meeting and ask where the others are. The red-eyed woman replies that Yugo went to deal with a problem. Saki's trauma has made her too anxious, so she won't be coming. And Kazuki went to update Kei with the latest information. The woman scoffs and says the situation feels like a school group project. A guy sitting beside her says it's too much drama over just one delinquent. The man with the yellow tie places the paper envelope on the table and says he has something to discuss regarding Kenya Najimoto. The two figures at the table look at the document, and the standing man continues, saying Ken had a routine checkup today. And the result is what they're looking at. The redhead asks what this is, since the boy isn't a critical patient. The man sitting next to her says obviously he got hurt in the battlefield and in the bus accident. And the guy of the yellow tie says that's exactly the point, and that this is the perfect time to strike. It was also confirmed that the boy enrolled to return to university. The redhead adds that if he wants to work on group projects, the university is one where the Seven Star Society has strong connections. She then recalls some of the people she knows there. We live in a dangerous world. A fight in college could very well end in someone's death. The woman laughs, excited by the idea. Then the redhead has another idea and wonders what if he were an agent of some shady organization. Just joking, of course. The shady figures pass the document back to the table. Atsushi Ayanokoji, secretary of the security committee, says he'll take care of it. It'll be something hard to cover up, so I'll make sure to explain the full truth, says Kimita Minato, owner of the largest telecommunications company in the country. But this story will only work if he's already dead. The 7 stars connections at the university won't be enough to finish him off. Kanzaki Tomo, daughter of a congressman and chief secretary to the prime minister, offers to enroll some ability users at the university. On a full moon night, music can be heard playing in the distance. A sound comes from a ringing phone. The phone's owner reaches out to grab it. The young man answers a call from Herms. The violet-haired youth sounds quite cheerful on the other end. Herms says it's an honor to speak on the phone with the public hero, but Ken tells him to quit stalling and say what he knows about May's case. The informant pretends to be offended, saying Ken is too cold. He doesn't know about May's case yet, but he does have some interesting information for the young man. Herms mentions a contact in the protagonist's phone. He sends the location of Aki Kumiyama, who should have some clues. Our guy asks, worried if Aki is in danger. The young man on the other end of the line replies that she's still in the country, but in a place harder to reach than if she were abroad. Speaking in riddles, the informant says she's close but hard to find, though maybe Ken can manage it easily. Oreo the headache, a protagonist, asks him to just say it plainly. Herms then says, putting it simply, that she was captured by the 7-Star Society. The information leaves the young man in shock. Ken pauses for a moment and tries to process what he just heard. It feels like the ground crumbles beneath his feet, leaving him in nothingness. The protagonist takes off running, leaving the phone behind, still on the call. Herms talks to himself, saying the boy should keep running until he dies as he runs out of breath. Ken is furious with the discovery. Our hero runs like a madman through the streets of Tokyo to save Aki. Artificial lights illuminate the night. On a phone call, a group of detectives say they've lost track of a certain delinquent. Dropping his drink, a man listens intently on the phone. Yugo asks the detective what he means by needing more henchmen. He himself is already short-staffed. The executive uses as an example the fact that he wants to hire the bodyguards of the person on the phone. And if that person were to die in an accident, they wouldn't need bodyguards anymore. Before Congressman Maeda can respond, Yugo hangs up on him. The big man glares at the phone. Pissed off, he hates people who don't know their place. Every time Yugo remembers the little brat who slipped through his fingers, he gets chills. And to make it worse, the guy they thought was dead showed up out of nowhere. The executive paces the room restlessly. Yugo grabs a bottle of whiskey and keeps ranting about how obstacles keep getting in his way. He throws the entire drink on a seated woman, saying that even the ones supposed to solve problems are useless. With a hollow look in his eyes, the executive tells the woman he should cut her tongue out. The woman only trembles in fear, head lowered. Apologizing for interrupting, a messenger tells Yugo that the 7-Star Society needs to speak with him. The man says, "I'll be right there." He also orders someone to keep an eye on the woman and move her to another location. 2 men in black shove the woman into a car. A third guy, smoking a cigarette, says if the woman had just played her role as bait, everything would have been fine. A young man interrupts the scene, asking what the guys are doing. The girl in red recognizes the protagonist. The cigarette guy asks who the heck this guy is. Ken thinks for a moment before answering, but ends up saying again that he's just a delinquent passing through. The thug actually laughs in his face. He asks if Ken is drunk or something. As the goon goes to shoot him away, Ken's hand is already flying toward him. The guys holding the woman only feel a gust of wind brush the backs of their necks as something whizzes past. The cigarette guy gets launched far. As the dust settles, the protagonist jokes that the others must be drunk too. Looking at the unconscious guy he threw, he says the criminals drank until they passed out. The young man looks at the other 2 guys and says that before blacking out, they cause a lot of trouble. One henchman loses his patience. The man in a suit charges at the young man. In no time, he's face to face with his opponent. Little does the criminal know that Ken is worse than Yasuo doing martial arts, dodging everything. The protagonist grabs the man's head like a goalie, then slams the goon onto the hood of the car. The other guy sees what happened to his buddy, and still charges at the protagonist, who dodges the kitchen knife. Our guy grabs the knife-wielding thug by the hair, spins him 180, and smashes the guy's face into the hood of the car. Ken says the henchman's drunken habits must be awful to just faceplant like that into the car, especially since it's a pretty expensive car. The young man lifts the thug by the hair and asks if he agrees, but the guy, now covered in gunk, is clearly on another plane of existence. The protagonist says to the knockout criminals that in that drunk state, they're better off staying down. The clever girl who had hidden herself steps out from an alley. Ken looks for the voice, filled with anticipation. Crying, the girl asks if it's too late. Our guy takes the girl's hand. The young man apologizes and says it's all his fault. Aki doesn't take long to explain that Ken's sister fled to the neighboring country to the north. The boy is caught by surprise. The girl continues, saying she overheard Yugo Mizukami talking about it on the phone. Yugo was furious and threw the phone across the room. The criminal blamed the girl for May's escape. He had even thought she was dead. Ken says the boy's yelling made all the nostalgia disappear. His colleague asks where the protagonist has been for the last 5 years. The boy says he went to study abroad and afterward met some people. Then the acquaintance asks if he's been involved in any shady dealings. The protagonist pictures shady types as people who steal other people's money, but Ken had pointed a gun at a man. So the young man answers that he's definitely not a scammer, though the others still suspects. Looking around, the protagonist asks who those people are. Coming down the hallway, rows of young people dressed in black approach. They're from the northern neighboring country. Ken asks why they're cosplaying as monsters inside a university. His colleague replies that if only it were just cosplay. The international situation in Japan has become complicated. Oil has been replaced by an energy source called anasopac, a substance used to trigger awakenings in people with powers. Since Japan developed the substance, a large number of awakened individuals have begun to appear. Consequently, organizations around the world have been taking action. On the surface, it's just an exchange program, but in reality, it's espionage. The acquaintance then corrects the protagonist. He says that the students from the north are indeed a mafia. Paradise is from the northern country. Pure Stream is from the eastern country, and the Hanrang faction is from Japan. The students have established a rule called duel, which basically means, if you're unhappy, fight about it. The university's self-governance committee still exists, but has lost all credibility. Ken says all of this is a waste of time. A tall guy with green eyes calls out to him and tells him to move out of the way. The protagonist sees the provocation as entertainment. The big guy stares directly at our hero, waiting for him to comply. Before things explode, another guy interrupts them. The skinny one says the green-eyed guy can't get through because there's a balloon of resentment in the way. This leaves the big guy furious. He gets ready to punch the skinny guy, asking if they didn't teach him to shut up in paradise. Holding the tall guy's arm in the air, the skinny one says of course he knows, and adds that in paradise they teach adults not to interfere in children's games. A voice echoes through the hallway saying that's enough. The owner of the voice, a girl in a yellow cloak, approaches the commotion. She questions whether Japan's Hanrang intends to upset the school's balance. The skinny young man recognizes her as Jean Quixia from Paradise. Avoiding the topic, the skinny one points at the protagonist and says he should take better care of himself. Ken is completely confused. He doesn't even know the guy. Quixia walks past, saying that in the end the others will just sit back while the weak are crushed. The girl looks at the boy and says he's nothing but trash. After everyone walks off, the colleague tells the protagonist that's just how things are at the university nowadays. Not even a minute later, a student comes running to ask if the teacher is okay. The boy pauses to catch his breath, but Sumiori Tachibara, president of the self-governance committee, arrives and apologizes for being late. The professor reassures him, saying there's no need to worry, they're both fine. The student admits he's ashamed to show this side of himself. Iori explains that this is the current state of his committee, a group in name only. Ken is already dissociating and doesn't even listen. Even so, the committee leader keeps talking, and with a sparkle in his eyes, he asks advisor Ken Yanajimoto to take care of them. Ken starts to agree and says he'll do his best, but then he realizes he's not an advisor to anyone. The three men look at each other in silence. Iori asks the young man if Professor Sawayama hadn't explained it to him. The boy says the professor promised to bring in someone amazing to be the advisor, and Ken gets more annoyed than when three guys tried to ambush him. As the professor brags, the boy asks how he dares to trick him. The protagonist says the only way he'll accept is if there's a guarantee that the committee is different from the other factions. He looks into the eyes of the committee president and asks if he will remain humble after gaining authority. The boy lowers his head at the question. Eventually, the committee member responds that of course they would change. Ken says that in that case, he wants nothing to do with it. The president hadn't finished speaking because he truly believes they would change. He says that once they have authority again, it won't matter what they have to do, even if they have to use their advisor as a stepping stone. As the leader of the committee, he's going to transform this rotten school into something to be proud of. At nightfall, the three guys share a drink, sitting on the grass. Ken tells Iori he's quite charismatic. Blushing slightly from the alcohol, Iori says alcohol tolerance is the most important trait in a leader. The boy asks our hero if he can ask a question. Then the president asks if Ken is close to Professor K. The protagonist freezes at the question. And then Ken asks Iori, shifting the mood of their casual chat, how he ever came to meet someone as terrifying as K-sensei. A flashback shows a high school student. At his feet, another teen is lying on the ground. The standing student watches the other struggle to breathe, the floor around him stained red. Unharmed, the teen asks the people nearby if they always took pride in bullying the weak. We see that in fact, several students are lying unconscious or groaning on the ground around him. Some of them are completely knocked out. Others are barely trying to get up. The only boy still standing says he feels like garbage when he's around these arrogant types. Our hero, still young, looks again at the student on the ground. He notices the boy doesn't look well. His right hand won't stop trembling. Ken says he's experiencing symptoms similar to his own, the sensation of body and soul tearing apart. The student is shocked to realize someone understands him. Then the protagonist explains that he calls this process metamorphosis. The standing teen kneels beside the one on the ground and says that now that he's seen it, he can't ignore it. Our hero helps the student to his feet and comforts him, saying that while he's going through metamorphosis, he won't let anyone touch him. He also explains that after it's over, he'll be on his own. But Ken's gentle smile makes it sound like a joke. The student finds the act of kindness very moving and watches on his knees as the protagonist walks away. In a tall building in Tokyo, a man with glasses wonders if he's feeling nostalgia for the first time, but he concludes that's not the feeling. This sensation is more like the excitement of discovering something new. Four Eyes remembers that the protagonist also went through metamorphosis, and yet he was totally fine back in high school. The professor asks himself, though he can't quite believe it, whether Ken is already in the next stage. The man evaluates silently. Behind the weirdo, the office wall is covered with articles and notes suggesting a certain obsession. There are also maps and photos of students pinned up. The situation is exceeding the professor's expectations, igniting his curiosity. Kei believes he'll soon have a new guinea pig. The sun shines through the tree leaves. The university court is empty. Sawayama asks Ken if he's immune to hangovers, and the boy replies that it's actually the professor who's too weak. The professor confesses he didn't expect the protagonist to accept the position as committee advisor. He goes on to say that maybe Ken wants a place to stay, that our hero doesn't like seeing his friends pushed into a corner. Sawayama admits that either way he's happy. The protagonist replies that housing wasn't the reason he accepted the offer, but rather because, in Yora's eyes, he could feel his honesty. Ken remembers Eki trying to comfort him and tells the professor that he knows when someone is lying. The boy confesses that he likes people who are true to themselves. Sawayama says that kind of person is rare in this region. Someone stops as they approach. The girl looks at the scene in disbelief. The professor, still talking, chokes on his water when the woman shouts Ken's last name, Yanajimoto. The honest Aoi greets our boy, making Sawayama swallow his words. Seeing the young woman's excitement upon finding the protagonist, the professor senses that Ken pulled a fast one on him. Interrupting the cheerful conversation between the journalist and the boy, Sawayama grabs Ken and says, filled with envy, that in the end, he already found his place. The protagonist asks the reporter what she's doing at the university, and she replies that she came to interview the students. Aoi reveals that she heard a rumor that various factions have been gaining strength on campus. Unknowingly, the journalist is drawing attention from people around her. The woman tells the protagonist that since this is a prestigious university, she came to investigate the situation in person. However, no one has agreed to be interviewed so far, and our hero is impressed that Aoi is still in one piece. Regretfully, the reporter says she'll get in trouble with her boss if she returns empty-handed. Ken offers to help her, and the young woman is surprised. Pointing at Sawayama, the protagonist says that despite appearances, the guy is part of the faculty. The professor realizes there's no way to dodge this. The trio walks across the university campus. The journalist and the professor chat while Ken watches from a distance. Sawayama explains to Aoi that the factions have powerful sponsors, except for one faction. The Amadori faction is an exception. The members of Amadori don't cause trouble and don't have sponsors. Even without influence, people like that faction for being thoughtful and having a good reputation. The professor concludes that the credit goes to the faction's leader and advises the reporter not to try any more interviews. Aoi is surprised because she had gotten permission from the university. Sawayama explains that it's not about that, and since she's an outsider, he's going to give her some perspective. The man says that the university is a place where you never know what's going to happen or where it's going to happen. With that, the professor says he's leaving because he has work to do, and Aoi thanks him for the help. Before leaving, the colleague gives Ken a thumbs up, though Ken knows he misunderstood everything. The reporter tells the protagonist the professor seems like a good person, and our hero kind of agrees. The protagonist asks the girl what she plans to do now. Aoi replies that she plans to stay a little longer. Ken tells her there's no problem with walking around, but that she shouldn't leave his side. Blushing hard, the young woman starts dying of embarrassment. Aoi realizes they'll basically be having a date on campus and imagines an impossible scene in them playing tag. Her fantasy is interrupted by a guy who walks up saying he heard there was a journalist on campus and came to check it out. Annoyed, the guy says it turns out to be just some shallow woman kissing up to the student council. Ken steps in and says the reporter is a guest. The guy just gets angrier at the fact that some random stranger was walking around so openly. Our hero notices the suspicious movement. The guy pushes the girl aside, right before the punch hits her. Aoi is scared by the chaos and screams. The guy with the ponytail says the university's rules are about to collapse. Staring at the boy and the girl, he says the student council should stay out of it. Our hero doesn't like that talk one bit. The gray-haired youth asks the protagonist if he plans to take on the entire Paradise faction. Ken says there's no reason to resist. Getting closer to the reporter, the guy says the kid should have been honest from the beginning instead of pretending to be tough. Our boy cuts him off mid-sentence to correct him, explaining that resisting means having to make an effort. Aoi watches anxiously as the protagonist stands up to the thug. The weirdo asks the hero what he means by that. Ken makes a declaration on behalf of the entire student council. From now on, the council protests against the Paradise faction. The protagonist ends the taunt by saying if they didn't like that, they can fight. Our hero mocks his opponent, and even gives a little smirk to show who's boss. Inside the university, Iori walks calmly. His attention is focused on his notepad. On the paper, we can see notes the president made about Ken Yanajimoto. The young man wonders if his conclusion that the boy seems trustworthy is actually true. In the end, Iori still can't reach a decision and chooses to just observe for now. A kid comes running in to share some juicy gossip. The student council president turns his attention to the gossip. However, the ground drops from under him when he finds out the new council advisor declared war on Paradise. The boy is in shock and asks, "Wait, what?" The crowd that loves a good fight has already gathered around to watch the brawl. Ellie watches from a distance to avoid accidentally catching a flying kick that wasn't meant for her. The guy with the ponytail pulls out a piece of wood bigger than himself. Pointing the wooden weapon at our protagonist, the guy asks what he wants if he wins. Ken says that if he wins, he wants the Paradise faction to be disbanded. The gray-haired youth can't believe what he's hearing. He tells the boy that even jokes have limits. The protagonist replies that he's not joking. Thinking about how the student council is falling apart, the weirdo sizes up our hero. The ponytail guy starts to say what he wants if he wins, but he's interrupted. Unable to get close, the student council president snaps, saying that Ken has only been at the university for a day. Desperate, Yori shouts that the protagonist doesn't understand the rules of the duel. Kuxia, who happened to be nearby, tells the council president to stop being dramatic. Because if Ken doesn't know the rules, it's the student council's fault for being so uncultured. Ori starts panicking over what's coming. The boy blames himself and begins thinking of ways to reverse the situation. Our hero notices that the president looks devastated. Ken can't ignore the student's suffering, so the protagonist walks over to the desperate boy. Yori is surprised as the boy approaches. Standing in front of him, Ken asks if he wasn't the one who most wanted things to go back to normal. The hero continues and tells the president he won't get anywhere on his own. Yori says that if anyone knows that, it's him. Our boy then lets out a laugh. Ken approves of the fact that the boy understood and returns to the fight. The people around ask the committee leader if he's okay. Other members of the committee try to comfort him, saying it's not his fault and they should kick the advisor out before things get out of hand. Iori responds that doing that would make sense. The boys try to convince him to back out before the fight starts. The president explains that if he wanted to achieve impossible results, he would need to bet on the impossible. The boy adds that even so, the advisor is kind of dumb. Iori looks at the guy with terrible posture and decides to trust him for once. On campus, a commotion continues. Our hero returns to his opponent and asks what they were talking about before. The provocation works, and the guy loses it. The maniac with the wood says he wants the same thing. The end of the student council. Kuxia becomes the guy's fangler right then and tells him to give Ken a complete beatdown. The protagonist's opponent charges in at insane speed. The guy ran, jumped, slipped, fell, and attacked. In the blink of an eye, they were already face to face. Everything was happening incredibly fast. And as always, our hero simply dodged. The guy realizes instantly that he missed. So he recalculates midair and lunges at Ken like a witch on a broom. Casually dodging successive attacks, the hero concludes that the 7-Star Society isn't sponsoring Paradise, because if they were, the other half of the bet would have something to do with Ken himself. The protagonist considers the possibility that it's whoring, but even if that's the case, they don't seem interested in interfering with the duel. The protagonist dodges with a moonwalk. The crowd around them seems blind and thinks our hero is losing just because he's not fighting back when really he's close to napping. A long-haired guy in the audience seems to realize how one-sided the fight actually is. Meanwhile, the stick maniac is furious. He begs the protagonist to stop moving so he can land a hit. Ken finally remembers the guy is even there. Our hero punches the gray-haired youth in the face. The guy goes down from the first hit. The protagonist steals the guy's staff. While the guy uses the stick to draw on the ground, the crowd comments in disbelief about what just happened. Some people even wonder if it was just luck. Our hero tried to draw a circle, but ended up sketching a bean. While Ken evaluates his artwork, a big brute tries to ambush him. And guess what? Of course he dodges. The protagonist grabs his opponent by the collar. Leaning on the staff, our hero throws the man much bigger than him over his shoulder. The guy lands headfirst and slides away. Ken reminds everyone of Kuxia's earlier words. He had to give his opponents a complete beatdown. The big guy starts trembling all over once he realizes the hole he's fallen into. Just as he was about to scream for help, the spy took a stomp to the face. You could hear the student's agony from far away. The protagonist makes juice spray from his opponent's body. The long-haired guy just calmly watches the scene, but the rest of the crowd looks horrified. Iori watches the scene with conflicted feelings. Covered in red juice, Ken makes it clear he's just doing what he was told. Our boy asks if it's enough beating for one guy. The poor dude passed out a long time ago. The protagonist looks toward Kuxia. The girl is stunned by the boy's audacity, who goes back to drawing on the ground. Now it's clear he's sketching a countdown starting from 0. Our hero almost messed up the number, and redoing it would have been a pain. Ken turns and points at the crowd. The boy starts counting how many heads are out there. Tired of counting, the protagonist turns to Iori to ask a question. The president snaps back to reality and asks what he wants. Our hero gets to the point and asks if multiple people can participate in a duel. As an example, Ken asks if it could be a 1 versus everyone duel. The committee leader says it's not a problem. If he chooses a number of opponents and they all agree, there's no limit. Waving his juice-covered hand, Ken Yanagimoto says he's way too lazy to count them one by one. The hero turns to the spectators and tells them to come fight. Obviously, the guys watching get all fired up. They charge toward the boy with fire in their eyes. Attackers come at the protagonist from every direction. Ken taunts the members of the Paradise gang and invites them to all attack at once. Everyone is stunned by the boldness, and within a second, they're sprinting at the protagonist. They all gang up to beat down the cocky guy. The first one comes flying in with a kick. Ken lets the skinny guy come full force, but the guy realizes something's wrong. Our hero grabs the kid's leg midair inches from his face and tells him to respect his senpai. To teach him a lesson, Ken crushes the guy's heel with one hand. As the kid screams, the other students arrive at full speed. The protagonist drops the guy and readies his staff. He knocks 5 teeth out of someone coming from above. The hero spins quickly forward and kicks the guy charging like a bull. Cowards prepare to ambush our boy. 3 guys grab the protagonist's torso to hold him in place, while another staff-wielding maniac drops in from above. The bird boy arrives screaming a war cry. No one can see what happened on impact, just a dark aura rising from the chaos. Several boys go flying as the next ones rush in to catch up. Ken spins his staff with just one hand. Then the protagonist spins like a bee-blade, tossing everyone away. Our hero tells the ungrateful ones that he's a good senpai who wasted his time playing with them. He stops talking just briefly to whack a rude guy. As the guy soars through the air, Ken senpai finishes, telling his ungrateful kuhais how upset he is. Another guy flies in with a kick, and the protagonist ducks, complaining about the lack of manners. The advisor cracks him on the head with a staff to knock some sense into him. A third staff-wielding maniac parachutes in, and it feels like the Paradise members are endless. The impact of the landing is phenomenal, and maniac number 3 is left in shock. Ken caught his staff in mid-air like it was nothing. Then the hero breaks the weapon like a twig, making the guy holding it fall. The protagonist creates a new belly button in the dude using the pole, and obviously, the maniac goes down. 2 boys who were debating whether to join the fight watch another ally get wrecked. Ken says that even if they want the senpai to die, they should say it with better manners. The 2 guys gather their courage and charge the protagonist. The first one to reach him gets turned into a pug, and the second one has all 4 wisdom teeth knocked out for free. Either way, they both fly like rag dolls across the campus. Our hero tells the members of Paradise that they're all trash. The rest of the onlookers are still trying to process what just happened. Edori is stunned to realize Ken was just as good as he claimed to be. The committee leader recalls the night they were hanging out. Both were drinking in silence. The protagonist breaks the silence by telling Iori he's highly recyclable. Not understanding anything, the boy just stares at him. So Aomon explains to the president that Ken was actually complimenting him, and the boy gets even more confused. The professor explains that if the protagonist is lightly insulting someone, it's actually meant as praise. The older man asks the boy if he knows what a vagabond is, and the younger one says no. So Aomon prepares the student for a special lesson. In simple terms, the professor says that a vagabond is someone who never stays permanently in one place. There's no real mutual interest between the vagabond and the people passing by on the street. Regardless of the kind of help the vagabond gets, he's already very used to the situation he's in. And so he continues until the end of his life. In the end, it seems they even reject what they absorbed, still alone, surrounded by enemies. The world doesn't give this person any breaks, but he keeps all the malice, fear, and looming misfortune inside, and turns his experiences into weapons to strike back. Some people try to get close to the vagabond, to take advantage of his strength, but even among those people, especially the most useless ones, the vagabond treats them like the trash they are and throws them away afterward. That's Ken. So Aoyama concludes that our vagabond hero is completely different from other human beings. Back in the present, another kid gets a free nose job. And that was the story of Ken Yanajimoto. The protagonist shakes the last student who jumped on him and tells the guy to open his eyes. Just because he broke his nose, the guy starts slacking off. Ken isn't having it and shakes him harder. The protagonist asks the student for his number. All beat up, the student still has enough strength to curse our hero out. Senpai loses his patience and tells him to just spit it out. It can't be that hard. When the kid hesitates, Ken asks if his ears are clogged and he can't hear. Even without knowing what the protagonist does with clogged ears, the boy panics and raises his index finger. The student starts counting slowly, 1, 2. It's like he thought the new nose came with free shipping. Then he keeps going, 3, 4, 5. Apparently, Kuxia blinked and missed the whole fight because she has no idea what just happened. The girl wonders what kind of monster the protagonist is, and decides to go into the middle of the mess and confront him. But she slips and falls flat on the ground. Kuxia asks Iori if this was all his plan, bringing outsiders in to solve the situation for him. The president listens to the accusations with his head held high. Then the committee leader explains that Ken is a former student, so it doesn't count. The girl feels humiliated, especially since even the nerd was now looking at her with disdain. Kuxia realizes she's lost control of the situation and starts thinking of ways to turn it around. Our hero wants to know if he's already met the quota to end Paradise, but the leader reminds him that she still has one last card up her sleeve. Jean Kuxia then calls Wai Zilong, the long-haired guy who'd been quietly watching from the corner. The girl, full of malice, tells the guy to draw his sword. Zilong says he'll take care of it. In position, the long-haired guy says he's at Kuxia's service. Wei Zilong draws his sword. The long-haired one seems excited to face our boy. Meanwhile, the protagonist is busy using his stick to write on the ground. We can tell the guy has improved his art. Among the countless opponents lying on the ground, number 182 stands out. Ken realizes there's still one miserable soul left to deal with. The protagonist actually gets annoyed at the thought of having to erase and rewrite the number. Zalong says it would be rude of him not to prepare to fight his senpai properly. Our hero pretends to believe the lame excuse. Without another word, the opponent draws his sword. The swordsman quickly charges with a wide attack. Ken barely moves and blocks with his staff. Blocked so easily, the long-haired guy realizes that this kid is on a different level. Zalong steps back 4 or 5 meters. The long-haired one admits that while the protagonist's presence isn't overwhelming, something feels off. Ken explains that it means compared to him, the swordsman is just a nobody. Taunting the enemy, the advisor drops his weapon to the ground and says he doesn't need one. Zalong says our hero is getting cocky just because he beat up a bunch of weaklings. The long-haired guy points his blade at the protagonist and tells him to keep up the arrogance. Closing the gap with long, fast strides, the opponent eliminates the distance. With flashy and extended strikes, the student promises Ken that he'll rip out his tongue. Zalong attacks relentlessly with a steady wrist. It's clear that the opponent is skilled with the longsword. Ken decides to fight back, advancing through the blind spot. Before the long-haired one can react, it's already too late. The protagonist lands a clean punch on the student. Even managing to block with his arms, Zalong spits red. The swordsman is launched by the impact. Mid-air, the long-haired guy prepares to drive his sword into the ground. The blade slows down his flying momentum. Zalong kneels, leaning on his sword, and Ken just watches from a distance, hands in his pockets. The swordsman pauses to reflect and try to understand what's going on. At the bottom of the crater in the ground, the student is stunned by our hero's immense power. The protagonist asks if the long-haired guy seriously thinks he has time to let him rest. Zalong gets up like an old lady with arthritis and admits he was wrong. Manifesting his aura, the swordsman confesses he underestimated the committee advisor, but now he's serious. Zalong stares at Ken with glowing red eyes and an empty expression. Red sparks shoot toward the protagonist. Faster than the eye can follow, the opponent moves to the hero's blind spot. Zalong handles the longsword skillfully and thinks to himself that no one matches his speed. The swordsman prepares an attack he's sure Ken won't even be able to see. With a smile, the opponent readies for the final blow. The long-haired one aims at the protagonist's back and tells him to regret it in hell. But Ken definitely sees the attack. They collide in an explosive impact. A group of students leaving class notices the rising dust cloud. The bald guy asks the person in front of him what just happened, and the guy replies it was too fast. He couldn't even see it. Everyone watches the smoke settle, eager to know what the hell just happened. Zalong is completely in shock. Our boy's hand simply stopped the sword. Ken stopped the blade with his finger. The swordsman can't accept that instead of dodging, he chose to grab it. It's like he's playing the child. Our hero turns to him and asks, "Don't tell me at your best." The long-haired one tries to pull his weapon back, but the longsword doesn't budge. Ken tells the freshman he thought he was done playing and sarcastically apologizes. The protagonist says that, as a good upperclassman, he should accept when he's invited, teleporting behind his opponent. Annoying, Zalong searches for our hero with his eyes. The swordsman tries to strike him, but Ken is already 180 degrees behind him. Zalong boosts his speed to go all in on one final attack. As the opponent strikes, the protagonist taps his wrists and grabs his throat. Ken lifts Zalong off the ground by the neck. Our hero watches as his opponent struggles for breath. The swordsman comes to the conclusion that this is the end for him. The protagonist looks at the sword in the long-haired guy's hand. Then Ken decides to borrow it. Zalong's neck starts turning purple. Our hero drops the unconscious long-haired guy to the ground. The boy looks at the number he wrote on the ground a few minutes ago. Ken drags the sword along the ground with the strength of an ogre. The student's sword breaks under the pressure. Successfully, our boy turns the number 2 into a 3. The protagonist is disappointed in the sword, but of course the blade is made in China. Ken tosses the sword onto the unconscious student and says his leader should have bought something better. Speaking of which, the boy looks to the crowd for the leader. Looking at Kuxia, the advisor asks if the girl remembers the deal they made. The girl turns to Ken in shock. Kuxia looks around and sees that all her allies have been defeated. The other students laugh and are already treating the girl like a joke. Things couldn't be worse for Paradise. The protagonist loses his patience and asks if by chance she still has more lackeys left to fight. The antagonist bites her lip in anger and glares at him, unable to answer. Our hero waits patiently for the leader of Paradise to respond. At the moment, the girl can only glare at the boy with hatred. Within the university grounds, people gossip about the latest events. One guy asks another where Paradise's strongest, why Zalong is, and the other replies that he got beaten with bare hands. The university students stare at Kuxia's back, waiting to see what she'll do next. However, the girl remains frozen as she listens to people around her whisper about the fall of her empire. The looks surrounding the former leader confirm her nightmare. Paradise is over. As much as Kuxia tries to find a way out, it seems impossible. Overwhelmed by despair, she covers her face with her hands. Through her fingers, the girl glares at Ken, blaming him for everything, wishing he had never shown up. Our hero, still covered in red juice, patiently waits for the girl's response. Around him, people are pointing, texting their cousins, and even filming. Hori is surprised by the silence. He expected the situation to erupt into chaos. The remaining factions are likely already regrouping to wipe out what's left of Paradise and reconsidering their strategy against the committee. The regular students are too afraid to celebrate. Iori asks Ken Senpai if he could have a quick moment. From afar, people observe the two boys talking, clueless about what it's about. The protagonist asks the committee leader if he's sure he wants to resolve things this way. Iori says he's actually worried about placing even more responsibility on Ken. Our hero agrees and goes back to what he was doing before. The boy stops again in front of Kuxia and says he needs to confirm something first. The girl looks nervously at the man twice her size. Ken asks the woman on the ground if she's being sponsored by someone or if this is a case of nepotism. The question catches the girl off guard. For a moment, she's speechless. But soon Kuxia responds that she doesn't have a sponsor but owes her power to her family. The protagonist scratches his head and decides to believe her. Then Ken takes a deep breath and shouts to everyone around that he's changed his mind and will no longer disband Paradise. People are extremely confused and begin whispering among themselves. But Ken isn't finished. He follows up by saying this is also a warning. The hyenas who come after Paradise members just because they lost, the fools who mock the student council, and any idiot who dares harm an ordinary student will have to be ready for a duel against Ken Sensei. Then the crowd finally goes wild. It feels like a World Cup final. The regular students celebrate the freedom to study in peace, and this historic moment at the university is being recorded. Aoi watches the scene in awe. Our hero found a way to restore order without encouraging oppression. Iori is deeply grateful. The student council finally has a purpose again. As happy as the president is to have Yanajimoto on his side, he can't help but think about the disaster it would have been if he had joined one of the factions. Kuxia, already shameless, is smiling and thanking him. But Ken cuts her off, saying the matter isn't over yet. What changed was the condition of the agreement. Our hero tells the girl that for everything to be settled, she'll need to bow and apologize to him. Kuxia is stunned because what Ken is asking in her country is the highest form of respect. The upperclassman adds that if she's not happy with that, they can settle things with a fight instead. And she's not as strong as her own henchman. Kuxia asks if that's really all she needs to do. The girl promptly drops to her knees and apologizes for her gang's behavior. She lowers her head to the ground, completely bowing at our hero's feet. Ken simply tells Kuxia not to forget that the one who truly saved her was the student council president. Trembling on the ground, the girl agrees. The boy deepens his voice and asks her in a commanding tone if she truly understood. Kuxia, completely humiliated and crying in rage, thanks Ken for saving her skin. A few moments of peace follow the event. The advisor is now convinced that Paradise was not the gang being sponsored by the 7 stars. Ken looks around and thinks the most suspicious ones are the whoring, while Kuxia starts quietly sneaking away behind him. The students in red watch the protagonist closely. The protagonist starts crafting a plan to lure the whoring, and Kuxia continues slipping away silently. A person with long lavender hair approaches to protest. Her name is Nanami Ishida, leader of Pure Stream, and she says she won't simply back down, inviting Senpai to a duel. Ken sees this as a good opportunity to gather more information and asks what she wants if she wins. Preparing her sword, Nanami says that if she loses, Pure Stream will obey the committee. Our hero likes that and asks the girl what happens if she wins. Nanami says she simply doesn't care. The swordswoman's goal is to show the advisor how strong Pure Stream really is. Ken and Nanami face each other, getting ready for the clash. The girl makes the first move, drawing her sword from its sheath. The swordswoman charges, and her attacks are too fast to see. In the blink of an eye, she's already passed through the protagonist. 2 strands from Ken's bangs are sliced in the process. The advisor is impressed the country in complete chaos can still produce this much talent. The woman stays silent and motionless for a moment. Then Nanami changes her mind and decides to surrender after all, because attacking Ken was like trying to cut concrete, ending the fight. Our hero says that as a hairdresser, she did great. The boy puts on a tired expression and asks if there's anyone else because he really feels like taking a break. The protagonist was about to say that fighting level 2 powered people is exhausting, but he was interrupted. Something came in fast from a short distance. A skinny guy came at full speed to punch our boy, but hit the ground instead, forming a mini crater. The skinny guy calmly lifts his fist from the ground, and without even looking at the upperclassman, the freshman tells him he can't rest yet. Another guy approaches from behind the skinny one. The big guy stands beside him, both wearing the typical red uniforms of whoring. A bit further back, Nanami is surprised by the power whoring had never shown before. As always, our boy doesn't waste words and gets straight to the point, asking if they're with the 7 stars. The big guy is about to slip up, but the skinny one cuts him off. Then the freshman tells the protagonist to stop talking nonsense, saying they're just representatives of whoring looking for a duel. Ken taps his forehead with his index finger and tells the wind that it's over. The skinny guy shouts from afar asking what he's talking about. Ken looks at him and says whoring is finished. At the end of the 1990s, as the 20th century was coming to an end, people with special abilities began to emerge among the population. These individuals with powers could control and channel the energy within their own bodies. By breaking a certain barrier, they managed to surpass human limits. These individuals didn't just gain sharper senses, but also extraordinary physical abilities. At the first stage, the abilities of superhumans were 4 times greater than that of a normal person. At the second stage, this difference jumped to 16 times, though power levels weren't fixed. Depending on the situation, superhumans could have strategic value greater than dozens or even hundreds of ordinary people. However, with the powers came side effects. The bodies of people with special abilities began to deteriorate and wither due to a mysterious phenomenon. Then, anonymous pioneers developed a certain substance. These pioneers claimed that this substance not only prevented the side effects, but could also turn ordinary people into superhumans. This became the gateway to the creation and control of individuals with special powers. Nations and organizations worked day and night to produce stronger and stronger superhumans, controlling every stage of research. Even with national support, level 2 individuals were extremely hard to create. Even with 100% government backing, it was still difficult to develop a batch of level 2 people. Creating level 2 superhumans was important because they delivered guaranteed results. It was a level of power humanity had never reached, and it was supposed to ensure success. That's what all of us believed. That was the common belief until now. But now it seems all of that was nonsense. That's what everyone watching Ken Yanagimoto was thinking. Our hero had wiped the floor with 2 level 2 superhumans simultaneously. The protagonist held the skinny guy up by the collar as he interrogated him. But the answer stayed the same, that they were just members of Hwoarang. Ken loses his patience and slams the kid to the ground. The protagonist says that if he answers, he'll make it quick. A third member of Hwoarang watches the scene in a panic. The student considers making a surprise attack while Ken is busy with the other 2, takes a step forward. But before anything else, the protagonist, still with his back turned, tells him it's fine to attack as long as he's ready for the consequences. The kid freezes on the spot. Our hero turns his head just enough to look directly at him. The stare is so overwhelming the boy feels it in his entire body. All the courage the Hwoarang member had vanished. The murderous intent in Ken's eyes nearly made the kid throw up. When the boy in red looked up, it felt like the entire world had narrowed down to that single stare. Slowly, the sky reappeared. The kid started screaming and begging for help like he'd just seen the girl from The Ring. After barely pulling himself together, the boy concludes that Ken Yanagimoto is far more dangerous than the 7 stars. The sight of the protagonist will haunt him for a long time. The third Hwoarang member then points to the 2 fallen students and says he was only trying to say that those 2 were Hwoarang. The skinny one yells at him from across the field, asking if he's trying to get them all killed. Our boy, with good humor, asks the kid if he has any idea what's going to happen if he doesn't stay quiet. And he makes sure to remind everyone that there's a fiery reporter filming everything going on. The skinny one pauses to think it over. The big guy's been lying on the ground so long, he might as well be a lizard now. At this point, they only have one option. Without a moment of hesitation, they both bolt toward the hills. Ken lets them go because he's got something else to take care of now. The protagonist turns to the third red-clad student who didn't even get to fight. Just to confirm what he already suspects, the upperclassman asks if the kid can even say where the other 2 are from. The boy stays silent. Ken spends a moment staring at the student. With a sigh, the protagonist laments how afraid people are of simply saying the name 7 stars. Our hero puts a hand on the boy's shoulder and congratulates him on making a wise decision, because otherwise, he would have been made an example for everyone else. The trembling kid on the ground asks who the hell Yanagimoto really is. Ken asks if it wasn't obvious just by looking, and says he's just an upperclassman bullying his freshmen. The 2 henchmen hired by the 7 stars to infiltrate the university keep running for their lives. When they reach an alley that seems empty, they stop to catch their breath. The skinny one asks the big guy how Ken could be such a monster. The larger one says that for now they should just return to that person without saying who it is. Before the skinny one can respond, something touches him. In the blink of an eye, 2 strong arms grab the fugitives, and the owner of those arms wants to know who this certain someone they mentioned is. Ken asks the infiltrators if they wouldn't like to go home with a smile on their face. The skinny one, still full of attitude, tells our hero that if he messes with them, his family could be in danger. The protagonist actually laughs at the irony and notes how chatty this skinny guy is. While the big guy hasn't said a single word, Ken seems to get an idea. The boy grabs the big guy's head and examines it, then says that if he splits their mouths and combines them, maybe he'll get a proper answer. The protagonist shoves his hand into the bigger one's mouth. The other guy is no longer so full of attitude and watches the scene in horror as his partner screams. Ken rips out 2 of the guy's wisdom teeth with his fingers, no charge. Our boy holds up a third wisdom tooth and concludes that his idea was actually pretty solid. Then our dentist starts walking toward the next patient. The protagonist turns to the kid with all of his teeth and asks if he has a better idea. The skinny one raises his hand like, "Whoa, chill man," and yells at him not to come any closer. Back at the university, people are casually chatting about everything that just happened. Some wonder where the student council's representative is. A mysterious woman enters with a teasing era. The beautiful woman with long green hair asks if Yanagimoto isn't around anymore. Aoi tells the woman that Ken had some business to take care of and asks if something happened. Urokurin says she witnessed Ken's final human actions and wanted to invite him for tea. The reporter doesn't quite understand what she meant, but admits she doesn't think and likes tea. The green-haired woman shuts her down, saying she knows exactly what he likes. Hiro walks through the university halls. The atmosphere is completely different. The authority of the student council has been restored, but Paradise, even though it wasn't disbanded, is in collapse after its defeat. So many people left that the faction now only exists in name. Hore is now under direct supervision of the student council, which has diminished its prestige. Most of the members of Pure Stream remained, but the faction is currently under the command of the student council. Aoi Miyahara covered the entire transition at the university. She is now considered a brilliant reporter recognized for numerous achievements. Our hero sits alone on the campus steps. It seems the Seven Star Society has started to make its move. A boy in a Hwoarang uniform crashes to the ground. Nanami fights alone against 5 men in red. The swordswoman is really working up a sweat. One of her opponents charges forward with a nunchaku. Nanami defends herself using the sword's sheath. Both use brute force to try to break each other's defense. The girl wins, throwing her opponent far away. Another enemy quickly moves in from her blind spot, but Nanami notices just in time. The young woman uses her sheath to stop the second opponent's charge. Back in her fighting stance, the swordswoman grips the hilt tightly. Red sparks flash from her eyes as she activates her aura. Nanami draws her blade from the sheath, but a hand on her shoulder stops her completely. Ken warns the swordswoman that he already told her not to draw her sword on impulse. Nanami apologizes and puts the blade away. Our hero is closely overseeing the university's return to order. Ken tells the young woman that she would likely be in the top 5 of her home country. In front of them, 6 guys lie on the ground after training. Nanami confesses that in the past, that fact made her arrogant. The young woman explains that during a calamity, a key person was needed, and she admits she thought she was that key. The protagonist becomes very interested in this key. The word keeps showing up in his path. Just as Ken was about to ask Nanami about the key, someone arrives and interrupts them. Our boy looks ahead and senses trouble. Gurakurin has finally found Ken and invites him for tea. Sitting at a small cafe table, a boy waits as the beautiful young woman serves tea. The protagonist had been avoiding the girl, and she comments that it's never been so hard to invite someone for tea. The woman notes that she realized he's been avoiding her. Ken turns his face away, embarrassed. Looking at the brilliant red tea, the boy explains he's tired of bureaucracy and political drama and asks what she wants. Gurakurin says the only thing she wants is to talk with him. He's the hero who saved the university, but the woman has other reasons as well. The beautiful young woman confesses that every time she sees him, many things come to her mind. Flowers blooming in spring, the sound of cicadas announcing summer, the changing colors of autumn leaves, and the kindness of the first winter snow. Being near Ken makes her feel longing, even when he's right there. Gurakurin says the complex threads of fate tie them together, and she can't help wanting to be close. The boy is left speechless, but he quickly takes a sip of his tea and asks her to stop saying random things. Then Ken watches her with a skeptical look. Looking at Gurakurin, he reflects on how he feels something similar to what she described, especially the sense of nostalgia as if returning home or to family. The problem is, instead of familiarity, the boy feels an inexplicable strangeness. The girl asks if he liked the tea, and he asks what happens if he says no. Gurakurin replies that if so, she'll just assume he's lying. Ken notes that the young woman seems to know a lot about him. She looks at him tenderly and asks who knows, maybe she really does. Then the girl adds that perhaps she knows him as well as his parents do, irritating the boy. The woman begins to leave the table, but before that, she tells Ken he's free to come and go from this place. The protagonist watches as the young woman takes the cup away. Gurakurin explains that the cafe is called Verdi and it's run by the Amadori, making it a perfect place for a private conversation. Ken begins to question how such an obvious place could offer privacy, but he stops. There's something strange about the cafe. Even with the Amadori leader's popularity, no one even glances at them. The girl tells him a small adjustment was made to the location. Nothing special. Without a guide, the place is as unnoticeable as a tree by the roadside. People pass by as if it doesn't exist. Ken concludes that the woman in front of him is definitely not an ordinary human being. In fact, it's hard to say if she's even human at all. Another situation unfolds in one of the many offices in Tokyo. A powerful man reviewed the documents that have come to his attention. Ryuji Atsuka, the director of the National Security Committee, asks if it's true that both Paradise and Hwoarang have been defeated. His subordinate confirms and says that those groups no longer hold the influence they once had. The official asks which faction is responsible for such a feat, since both groups were backed by powerful organizations. Upon hearing that it was all the work of a single man, Ryuji's eyes light up with interest. The executive questions whether the United States might have been involved in the outcome. The screen shows a mapping of people with special abilities. That's not the case, the subordinate explains. Even the Americans were caught off guard by the shift in dynamics at the university. Ryuji concludes that the only remaining possibility is the emergence of a new awakened superhuman, and he needs to meet him. The man in the suit stands, determined to find the protagonist. Ryuji immediately leaves his office. He orders that a car be prepared for his departure right away. A man standing outside the room says he's surprised the director himself is handling a university matter. Ayano Koji says that as a veteran of the National Security Agency, Ryuji should make rash decisions. The director disagrees and says this is exactly the kind of issue someone at his level must resolve. The star argues that they should value soldiers who follow orders more than uncontrollable strategic weapons. The secretary steps forward toward Ryuji. Ayano Koji stands face to face with the director and asks if he's still clinging to a failed project. Ryuji warns the secretary to be careful with his words. Some random guy tries to ease the tension. The director immediately grabs the man by the neck. Ryuji lifts him and tells his subordinates that the Awakened are far more than just weapons. They can become one-man armies. He throws the guy aside and explains that another difference between the Awakened and weapons is that you can actually talk to the Awakened. Ayano Koji asks what happens if they act like weapons that can't communicate. The director simply replies that no matter how monstrous their strength may be, deep down they're still human. Ryuji says he believes things can be resolved with sincerity, as he calls the protagonist. On the other end of the line, Ken answers the executive's call. The boy tells Rokuren that he needs to use the place immediately. The beautiful girl says she'll take a stroll since it looks like trouble is on the way. The protagonist says that because the person on the other end was very persistent, he decided to meet him once and for all. But Rokuren reassures the young man by saying that if he treats problems as part of fate, they might start to hold meaning. Then the girl walks away with a lovely smile and tells Ken that hardships are part of every hero's path. The protagonist guides the director to the Verdi Cafe. Ryuji observes the place with interest. The boy pulls out a chair and says he wants to get straight to the point. Ken sits and asks what the director of national defense wants with him. The man then pulls out the chair in front of him and assures him he didn't come to propose anything difficult. Staring at the protagonist, Ryuji confesses that he came to propose an emergency cooperation agreement. Our hero looks uncomfortable and asks if the executive is asking him to become a government dog. The boy recalls the times he spent in war. Ken tells the defense director that he was used as a test subject in America and had to spend many years working as a mercenary. When he finally thought he could get his life back, he received terrible news. His friend told him that part of his family had died and the rest were missing. The protagonist points a finger at the director and says that all this time the government never helped him. Instead, he was used as a puppet by the Seven Stars. Furious, the boy says he can only see this contract proposal as a form of control and surveillance. Looking Ryuji in the eyes, Ken asks if there's even one good reason to accept it. The director asks the boy to think of the deal as a way to achieve his own goals instead of helping the government, since they share the same enemies. However, it's necessary for the protagonist to consider the intentions of the National Security Committee in guiding his power. Ken confesses that he's willing to break the law to reach his goals. Ryuji says it will be the committee's job to make sure the young man's actions become legal. Our hero says he wants to ask just one question. What happens if, for some reason, he becomes an enemy of the nation? The director replies that in that case, they will stop him at any cost. Our hero activates his aura to make it clear to the director what he's dealing with. Then, with an oppressive gaze, Ken repeats the man's words about stopping him. Ryuji feels the pressure the protagonist exerts with nothing but his gaze. The young man tells the director that stopping him will be out of the question. The executive feels the weight of Ken's killing intent and compares it to the sensation of being chained. Our boy carries more pressure than most superhumans. However, the man clenches his fist with conviction. There is a big difference between what can be done and what must be done. Ryuji uses all of his strength to try and resist the protagonist's oppressive presence. Ken then smiles at the director. The boy tells the official that he's not fit for politics since he can't lie or flatter. The man admits he causes trouble for his superiors with his actions. Our boy walks past the big guy and says he'll accept the deal because he liked his attitude. Trying to pull himself together, the man says he understands. Ryuji extends his hand to Ken and tells him to reach out if he needs anything. The boy immediately shakes his hand and says he needs to know the whereabouts of Mei Yanagimoto and Kyoko Kuniyama. The protagonist informs his new partner that Kyoko is likely hospitalized somewhere. Ken searches through his phone for a list of locations. Then the young man passes on the information he stole from the detective. The man says he'll contact him as soon as he finds her and begins to leave. Before going, Ryuji reminds the protagonist that they'll be seeing each other often from now on. Ken agrees and waves him off. With no time to rest, the boy's phone starts ringing. The screen shows it's the reporter calling. Ken answers the call and Oda complains about his problematic way of picking up the phone. The protagonist asks what she wants out of nowhere, and the woman replies that she just wanted to thank him. Because of him, she won an award. The journalist admits that formalities can be boring and asks if the boy is available. The young man says he just finished dealing with his problems and tells her to wait in front of her house because he's on his way. A little too happy with the answer, the girl smiles from ear to ear and agrees. In an office, Ayano Koji apologizes to Kei and presents his new plan to his superior. The professor says all the secretary is doing is adding more victims to the equation and admits he didn't have any expectations anyway. The star protests, saying this time it'll be different, and if they manage to weaken him, it'll be easy to defeat him. Skeptical, Kei asks if weakening him is even possible. The professor adds that once again he only sent a pair of level 2 superhumans after the protagonist, but the secretary smiles. Again, Koji steps closer to his superior and simply mentions two names, Snowcat and Scavenger. The secretary explains that they're two mercenaries who fought against the protagonist while he was still in the United States. Both are used to fighting Ken and are professionals in this kind of work. One of the mercenaries says it's just a revenge match, but it seems like a waste to retreat after poking the hornet's nest. The woman in the cap asks the guy if it wouldn't be more fun to settle the score once and for all. However, the man with the scar on his face seems only interested in completing the mission and asks if the residents have been evacuated. The cap-wearing mercenary protests and asks the man if he doesn't want to take out the Yasha. In fact, there's a saying in the East. It says that you can't defeat someone who's having fun with what they do. In the rifle's scope, we can see the protagonist right in the center. And after the zoom, it becomes clear that Ken has already noticed the weapon aimed at him. In the evacuated city, a woman's voice is heard. Aoi Miyahara runs toward the protagonist. The mercenary hesitates briefly upon seeing her. No one else was supposed to be there besides Ken Miyajimoto. Then the girl in the cap turns to her partner for clarity, and the scarred man explains who she is. After a brief thought, the mercenaries consider the protagonist's possible alliance with the media and decide to eliminate the girl immediately. The maniac in the cap doesn't need to be told twice and already aims her sniper rifle at poor Aoi. As she strokes the trigger, the mercenary says that if the girl wants to blame someone, she should blame the monster in front of her. The weapon fires, and the sound confirms someone's been hit. The bullet and the protagonist fly toward the reporter at the same speed. Aoi watches the scene before her in horror. Our hero simply caught the projectile midair with his hand. Ken holds the bullet like it's a 200 note, then drops the crumpled metal to the ground. The boy looks at the damage on his hand and concludes that it wasn't just any bullet, it was specialized against superhumans. Panicked, the journalist asks the boy if he's okay, since all she saw was something flying toward him. The protagonist tells the girl to wait right where she is. Then he activates his ability and promises he'll be right back. Ken expands his power to locate someone he already knows. His vision cuts through the trees in the distance in the direction the shot came from. And finally, he spots a certain someone's cap. The protagonist has found his target. Without wasting time, the boy uses his energy to move like a bolt of lightning. Ken leaves a trail of light as he speeds toward the opponent. Our hero is not happy about being treated like a janitor, always cleaning up someone else's mess. The boy notices that the cap he spotted earlier is now close. Ken charges in with full force to clean out the tree, but our boy realizes something's not quite right. Looks like a protagonist got played by the mercenaries. Camouflaged in the bush, the mercenary even mocks our hero. Ken locates her quickly because she just can't keep her mouth shut. She hasn't learned. Once again, she keeps talking instead of just pulling the trigger. The crazy woman finally fires and seems to believe she hit the hero. Smoke escapes from the freshly fired rifle barrel. The talkative mercenary is stunned. The boy pulled a last-second matrix dodge and the bullet only grazed his face. Our boy reveals it was all calculated to lure the rat out of hiding, and then charges in. A second later, the two enemies are face to face. Ken decides that this is where he's going to end the unfortunate story. The young man prepares a punch charged with his energy. In the middle of it all, the mercenary begs for mercy, screams that she gives up, waves the white flag, and even throws in a Yamit Kudasai. Luckily for her, the protagonist is curious and reroutes his punch to the ground. Completely surrendering, the woman offers to give up a piece of information she holds, and after hearing it, Ken can decide if he still wants to kill her. Our hero tells her to spit it out already. The girl doesn't need to be told twice. Then the mercenary asks Ken if it really looks like she came alone. The boy realizes the hole in his plan and panics. Still on top of the enemy, Ken expands his vision. The protagonist channels his aura toward the place where he left the reporter. At that moment, Aoi seems fine. She's just standing there questioning her life choices. But out of nowhere, the winds of change arrive. A guy grabs her by the collar, like a grocery bag, and slams the poor girl onto the concrete. The mercenary realizes she wasn't there for work and grabs her by the hair. And the guy even had the audacity to blame her. Confused, Aoi asks what the heck he's talking about since she was just standing there. The mercenary accuses the girl of being a stalker and pulls out his tactical knife. Then the guy slips and reveals that he's really going to kill her out of revenge, and maybe a little jealousy. The young woman decides she needs to buy time. So the journalist remembers something our boy said while cleaning house at the university. Aoi gathers all her courage and accuses the man in front of her of taking the mission personally, when in fact that wasn't what he was being paid to do. And wouldn't you know, the girl's got a point. The guy gets pissed and decides to stab her anyway. But then the mercenary realizes he can't move. The man feels an unexplainable pressure throughout his body, and he becomes paralyzed. Then the soldier realizes not everything is worth doing for money. The world around him disappears, and the ground is replaced by Yanajimoto's oppressive gaze. The guy bites down on a cherry-flavored gum, and regains control of his body using the candy's energy. The mercenary expands his aura to break free from the protagonist's ability, and the poor journalist goes flying like a kite. In just a matter of milliseconds, Ken praises the girl for buying time and catches her before she hits the ground. Whatever that guy took, he's a lot stronger now. The opponent charges at the boy. The energy of the two superhumans collides, sending lightning in all directions. The protagonist grabs the soldier's armed arm and asks if he's been having trouble sleeping. Ken then promises to let the mercenary go today so he can sleep with his mother. The guy flies into a rage. "Tonight you're free to sleep with mommy." Hearing those words, the mercenary was furious. The opponent wanted to take out the protagonist right then and there, but he knows his body isn't in great shape, and the mission to weaken the hero has been completed. Even though he's been spared, the guy leaves with a promise to Ken that next time will be his end. The protagonist is grateful internally, knowing that fighting him to the end would have been a hassle. Our boy tries to push the reporter away, but she says it's just a scratch and she's fine. From a distance, the mercenary in the cap watches the two like a weirdo. In fact, the nutjob's annoyed that Ken somehow managed to get even stronger. The woman laughs at her own luck. If she hadn't surrendered in time, she'd be 6 feet under. The protagonist tells the lunatic that he let the guy go, but quickly warns her not to try anything funny. Surrendering again, the woman assures him she keeps her word. The mercenary says the mission she was hired for is complete, and she never wants to be near the protagonist again, because despite everything, the soldier still dreams of living a long life. As a farewell courtesy, the weirdo spills a secret. Now Ken knows that his next opponent will be none other than Yugo Mizukami. The crazy woman says that if anything happens, they can call Big Sis, referring to herself. Then the mercenary offers the reporter a discount coupon for the inconvenience of almost sending her to the afterlife. Ali asks if she has no shame giving something like that after nearly turning her into a memorial photo. The woman observes that the girl isn't like them, and the girl asks what she means by that. Then the mercenary explains that some people are so close to their own end they start adapting to anything. The lunatic even adds that Ao is one of the good ones. And like she's leaving a party, the woman says her goodbyes and hopes never to see the pair again. Aoi asks what that woman's deal is while staring at the discount coupon. The girl hears Ken softly call her name and answers right away. While the reporter worries about the boy's condition, he's trying to tell her that the two of them can't meet anymore. Aoi is in shock. Not only did she almost die, but now she's getting rejected too. The journalist asks the protagonist if he believes she's only after him because of her job. Before even getting a reply, she shouts in anguish that she didn't come to find him because of work. The girl crumples the coupon while telling Ken that it's not just about the drama that shows up on camera. Aoi talks about how he stares danger in the face to resolve things, and she confesses that she finds him inspiring. Our hero stays silent and the girl begins to speak again, but he cuts her off. Ken assures the journalist that he knows she's not that kind of person. The protagonist explains to Aoi that he's strong and knows he's not in danger no matter the situation. Remembering what happened to the people who mattered to him, the boy confesses to the girl that in the end he always ends up alone. He ends his speech saying he doesn't want to carry that weight anymore. Aoi then asks if the reason he's distancing himself is because he sees her as someone weak. Shaken, the reporter says she understands that eventually she might become a burden. Then Aoi looks the boy in the eye and says that no matter how strong he is, without support from others, he'll lose his mind. The young woman grabs the protagonist's hand and confesses she's seen this scene play out many times through her job. Our hero looks visibly upset as he watches the girl try to save their bond. Ken grips his friend's shoulder. The boy lowers his head and starts begging Aoi to go away. The journalist is speechless but seems to understand. Even as she walks away, the girl says she will still get closer to the hero again someday. And before leaving, Aoi looks into Ken's eyes and asks if she'll still be one of the people he'll answer to. The protagonist watches her in silence. Tears begin to well up in the boy's eyes. Aoi walks away with a fake smile. Ken watches the figure of the journalist disappear on the horizon. Our hero sighs as he tries to recover from the farewell. But, as always, the phone rings the moment he gets even a second of peace. The caller ID shows the call is coming directly from the university. Ken answers already half annoyed and asks what the person on the other end wants. Ryuji informs him that he found the name of the hospital where one of the people the protagonist is looking for was. But just as the protagonist was about to ask which hospital, he pauses and asks the executive what he means by was. Apparently, someone managed to remove her from the hospital without her family noticing, and now the girl is missing. Ken tells the executive to send reinforcements to his location when he can. Ryuji tries to convince the hero that it's too dangerous to act alone, but our boy cuts him off, saying he does whatever he wants. The official simply accepts that the boy is going to do whatever he feels like. Ken thinks of Aki and how her mother is the only person she has left in her life. Defeated, the protagonist picks up his phone to call someone he never wanted to owe anything to. Elsewhere, Aki is anxiously trying to complete a call, but every attempt goes straight to voicemail. The girl laments her bad luck. Just when she finally got her phone back, she can't reach him. On the phone screen, the name Kenja appears. Aki then gives up and decides it's better this way. It's better if Ken doesn't get involved. That's the only way she can save May and protect the protagonist. The young woman trembles as she thinks about everything she's had to endure. And after a second of silence, she breaks down, asking what's the point of someone who disappears when she needed them the most. Someone furiously rattles the doorknob of the room she's in. Aki looks ahead in desperation at what's about to happen. The entire door shakes from the force being used on the handle. Then everything goes quiet until Yugo loses his patience and kicks the door open. The young woman curls up in fear, and the criminal demands that she show herself immediately. Ake Kumiyama drops to the concrete floor. The The brute accuses the young woman of not only contacting the protagonist but also leaking information to him. Yugo cowardly grabs the girl by the hair. The executive insults her while she struggles in vain to break free. Desperate, the informant says the man has no proof and is only speculating. The criminal's empty eyes stare into the girl. Yugo decides to move on. While straightening up, the man tells the girl on the floor that she has no idea what he had to do to rebuild the underworld after Ken destroyed it. Yugo confesses that he had to swallow his emotions and accept unnecessary bureaucracy, relying only on his own instincts. Now comfortable, the criminal tells Aki that his judgment is absolute. Suspecting her was never speculation, it was conviction. The young woman finally gets up and asks what comes next. Aki looks Yugo in the eyes and says that if he plans to kill her, then his instincts aren't that good after all. The man gets angry that she still hasn't shut her mouth. Grinding his teeth, Mizukami grows furious, remembering that everything would have been different if he had stolen the Yanagimoto's secret. Yugo tells Aki that actually his plan is to make sure she never underestimates him again. Panic immediately floods the young woman. The criminal asks if he's speaking to the one in charge of kidnapping her mother and tells them to detach one of Kyoko's hands without letting the juice spill. Those words were the informant's greatest fear. Aki accuses Yugo of breaking his promise to keep Kyoko alive. The executive lights a cigarette as he agrees that was the deal. In fact, he told his goons not to let anything spill. The young woman protests, saying Mizukami's justification is nothing more than wordplay. Yugo tells Aki that if she keeps whining, he'll order the other hand removed too. The girl goes silent instantly. Aki processes the situation as she trembles in fury. Then she decides to kneel. Begging the criminal, Aki asks to take the punishment in her mother's place. Yugo says that for that to happen, the girl has to admit she's a useless piece of trash. As if the humiliation of the words wasn't enough, the executive insists she say them convincingly. Mizukami laughs while Aki begins to stammer. But the young woman manages to repeat the criminal's words, even as she cries. The informant's tears fall one by one onto the floor. Not satisfied, Yugo continues to humiliate the girl. Even as the man approaches, Aki doesn't move. If that girl's mother knew what she was going through, the old lady would have cut her own hand off by now. Mizukami reveals that he's going to be merciful since Aki was obedient. The man signals to a random goon to correct the previous order. Smiling cruelly, the thug says to take only one finger instead of the whole hand as an act of compassion. Meanwhile, on the web, a mysterious young man receives a call from the national hero. Herms watches Ken Yanagimoto make the call, revealing that the informant has access to the city's cameras. The protagonist asks the hacker again about Aki. This time, the boy wants to know the whereabouts of the girl's mother. Herms agrees but reminds our hero he doesn't accept payment in money. The informant celebrates that luckily Ken is very strong now and asks what he'll get in return. The boy simply tells Herms that he'll receive a reward equal to the job. The hacker asks the protagonist to promise and warns him not to even think about tricking him. Ken asks if he's ever left the informant hanging. Herms says no and promises never to disappoint someone like him. With the deal sealed, a notification with the requested information comes in immediately. Ken notices that the woman isn't too far from where he is now. So our hero decides, today's the day the 7 stars become 6. The late afternoon sun shines over the slums. 2 armed thugs guard the gate of a warehouse. Inside, a man crouches near a woman's hand with well-manicured nails. Apparently busy, the butcher is interrupted by a faint cry for help. Annoyed, the frightening figure stops what he's doing and complains that the noise is a pain. Behind the criminal, a very unwell woman is being watched by a thug as she vomits into a bucket. The butcher tells the goon to shut her up. The poor woman looks at the man in terror, and the masked thug simply raises his blade. The one in charge is literally half bald. He tells the other one to turn the lady into mincemeat after he's done. The butcher then notices something interesting on the floor. A gold ring glimmers on the woman's lifeless hand. The guy rips the ring off her fingers and feels satisfied. But once again, someone starts making a fuss in his slaughterhouse. A new goon arrives with an elderly woman tied to a chair, still in hospital clothes. The half-bald man recognizes Aki Kuniyama's mother and asks the tied-up woman if she got tired of waiting. Looking downright demonic, the thug says he'll finish her off quickly. The woman trembles to the core. The butcher grabs Kyoko by the hair and shows her how lucky she is not to have ended up like the others. That's when the old lady really loses it. The half-bald guy asks his colleagues where he's supposed to start cutting her arm, and the man who brought her in answers that it's just a pinky this time. The butcher is disappointed with the order and tells the woman that it was probably her daughter who saved her. Kyoko sees her reflection in the criminal's blade as he casually comments that losing a finger isn't the end of the world. The psycho raises the cleaver above his head like he's about to slice a steak and tells the woman to hold still or he'll miss. The guy gets ready to chop the lady's pinky off and politely asks her to stay very still. Meanwhile, someone is slicing a picanha. The man enjoys the meat. As he wipes his mouth with a napkin, the guy casually mentions that Yugo will take care of Yanagimoto. His subordinate says Yugo found a way to deal with the hero. Ayano Koji agrees that the guy is good at what he does, but that doesn't change the fact that he's a troublemaker. The man in the suit asks if this Yanagimoto is really that dangerous. The secretary's hand even starts to shake. At the moment, the Seven-Star Society has a solid foundation under Kei's leadership. But in the past, the organization was in ruins, and the reason why was a single man. One by one, the group's enforcers were defeated. Ayano remembers the hand that grabbed his neck, the same hand that obliterated the rest of the crew. Our hero, still a teenager at the time, reveals that he crushed the Mizukami family jewels. But he doesn't know what to do about Atsushi Ayano. The boy looks out the window and gets an idea. Looks like they're on the 4th or 5th floor. So the protagonist wonders how many times a star can fall from there before it finally breaks. The mere memory of Ken's face is already a nightmare. Ayano confesses that even the devil would have been kinder. Dropping his utensils on the table, the secretary says he's lost his appetite. He stands up and tells his underling to send someone to watch the mess from afar. On the plate, the food remains nearly untouched and the 5-pronged fork is dirty. Atsushi adds to the order, telling them to warn the guy that if he gets close, he's done for. Back at the slaughterhouse, the walls are filthy. The half-bald man looks at the hand that not long ago held the cleaver and realizes that 4 fingers went out for a walk. After a slight delay, the butcher screams and everyone looks toward the entrance. The guy who threw the knife is just standing there like it's part of his routine. Curled up in a fetal position, the commander tells the henchmen to do something already. The thugs arm themselves and block the young man's path. Ken only has eyes for the woman tied to the chair. One of the henchmen charges at the protagonist. The young man dodges effortlessly, then grabs the armed man's wrist, making him drop the kitchen knife. Yanajimono picks up the blade the enemy dropped and drives it between his ribs, making ketchup gush out. The other henchmen realize things have gone south for them. Then the protagonist paints the place red and looks at the rest of the gang with very few thoughts. The first lunatic to attack just drops to the ground, gets sick, and then kicks the bucket. The half-bald guy screams, outraged, asking why the hell the henchmen are using blades when they have guns. So the guys change strategy and draw their pistols. A wanted mafioso intern is the first to aim at the protagonist, but Yanajimono was no longer there. The intern was about to ask where the guy went but was interrupted by a surprise attack. Just like him, the other two were taken out before they could react. In an instant, Ken was already face-to-face with the butcher. The half-bald man stared in disbelief. The young man was already standing in front of him while his henchmen hadn't even hit the ground yet. With a quick smile, the guy shamelessly asks if he can leave. Our hero doesn't even say a word in the face of such audacity. Doubling down, the guy yells to be let go and calls Ken a monster. He takes a punch so well placed that his face practically collapses. Now looking like Voldemort, the half-bald man is sent flying. The butcher, now missing about 5 teeth, pleads to the wind for help. Our hero says that now he's asking for too much and stomps on him like a cockroach, bursting the red paint balloon. Meanwhile, the old lady has her eyes shut, praying Our Father. She follows the classic logic. If she can't see it, it doesn't exist. But she gathers the courage to peek out of the corner of her eye. Ken smiles at her, guilt in his eyes, and apologizes for being late. Elsewhere, Mizukami smokes a cigarette. The executive takes pleasure in the subordinate's despair. Aki still finds the courage to insult him. But the man clearly enjoys the challenge. Yugo flicks the cigarette at the pretty young woman's head and says even an ashtray is better than trash liquor. The brute warns her that whether he takes another finger depends entirely on his mood. When the phone rings, the executive tells the young woman the minor surgery should be over by now. Yugo answers the call asking the guy on the line if he cut properly, but he's surprised by another familiar voice. Ken tells the longtime acquaintance that it's been a while. Our hero asks the brute if he's been enjoying his pathetic little life, but he knows it couldn't have been easy, considering he turned the mobster into a eunuch. Regretting not having finished Mizukami off back then, Ken takes the opportunity to say he dealt with everyone at the warehouse, which shouldn't be a problem since Yugo never cared about anyone anyway. Before hanging up, the hero tells his enemy to stay alive and well until he arrives, because when he gets there, he's going to tear the Yakuza in half with his bare hands. Without having said a single word during the call, Yugo crushes the smartphone. The executive throws the device away, nearly hitting the girl. The brute stands up and tells a nearby henchman to call the guys at the factory, because they're going to war with everything they prepared for the occasion. Yugo turns to another henchman and says to get the gas mask ready too, because they're heading to the factory. The guy hesitates, wondering if gas masks will be enough. The mafioso asks if he has a problem with that. Without arguing further, the henchman simply obeys. Finally, Mizukami orders them to bring the girl lying on the ground as well. Aki, not understanding anything, panics. Back at the shacks, it's already nighttime. Our hero untees Kyoko and asks if she's okay. With trembling hands, the mother makes a plea. The woman grabs the young man's hand and begs him to please save her daughter. The protagonist's heart breaks in two. He holds the frail lady's trembling hands and with a forced smile, tells her not to worry, it'll take care of everything. Our hero carries Kyoko out of the filthy place. However, Ken thinks to himself that he doesn't know what he'll choose if he's forced to pick between his revenge and his friend's safety. The events take us to an abandoned laboratory. There, a panicked man wonders what he's going to do. Another guy nearby loses his mind and asks if someone's coming to finish him off. The panicked man is confused. Then the blonde thug says they know very well what's inside the barrels and realizes the enemy is already on the way. The man in the suit stares at the large drums, and while holding the edge of one says he's tired of all of this. Ken approaches the premises of the factory. Most of the low-level thugs are already done for. Now all that's left is to wait for Yugo himself to show up. The young man notices there's chaos happening inside the warehouse, so our hero takes a peek. A strange smell wafts from the place. Ken covers his nose with his arm and looks around. The place is filled with test tubes and flasks, as well as chemical agents found in cleaning products. The young man concludes it's a narcotics lab, but nothing explains that smell. At the far end of the corridor is a quadruped creature that looks like Satan himself. The thing comes running like it's possessed and leaps at the protagonist. In shock, the young man can only wonder what kind of beast bit that lunatic. The youth grabs the creature by the wrist and throws over his shoulder far away. But the thing is back on its feet in no time. Ken wonders what's going on now. The guy has completely lost it, just drooling and attacking. The protagonist concludes they injected an incomplete substance into the guy. Meanwhile, the beast stares at him with glowing red eyes. Our boy begins listing the crimes committed in the facility, and the list seems endless. He's interrupted by the junkie, who attacks again. This time, the enemy prepares a strike from above. Furious with everything he's witnessing, the hero charges his right hand and delivers a single blow to poor Satan. The guy doesn't even get sent flying. He just disintegrates right there. Our hero shakes his hand clean. He'll probably have to throw today's clothes away. Then Ken starts looking for the source of the gas. He stares at the spilled substances and wonders if all those test subjects in the past weren't sacrifice enough. Something catches the young man's attention. Not understanding what he just saw or what that red smoke was, the protagonist hurries to get out of there and discovers there was a surprise waiting for him. High beams reveal dozens of henchmen armed to the teeth, and at the center is Yugo Mizukami, who complains that the hero is late. The executive is holding a machine gun that's half his size, which says a lot. Then the coward asks if the protagonist liked the little surprise. The big guy holds a red pill and says it's an amazing item. Just one of these and anyone can push beyond their limits. But of course, the factory only had the cheap knockoff version. Yugo stops playing with the pill and grabs it in midair. Then the criminal tells the protagonist he's going to help him find his sister. Our boy is already sick of hearing that line. But then the executive says something that gets the young man's attention. He admits he paid a visit to his family's home. It's clear the information made the hero lose his cool. But as if he were talking about a trip to the market, Yugo laments that his parents didn't say a word. Even after pulling all his strings, the criminal couldn't find the girl. It's as if Mei Yanajimoto had vanished into thin air. With a dark expression, Mizukami says he regrets not tormenting the protagonist's parents more, because if he had applied enough pressure, maybe they would have given up the girl's whereabouts. Our hero stands completely still for a moment, showing no expression. Then the young man says he's satisfied, catching the criminal completely off guard. Ken explains that if Mizukami had run away with his tail between his legs again, it would have been a real pain. So he's actually very pleased that the monster casually showed up right in front of him. Yugo orders his countless henchmen to eliminate the young man. Several men in suits aim their weapons at a single boy. Our hero realizes he can't afford to hold back and begins to release all his energy. Mizukami's subordinates fire without mercy. Ken flips into the air, soaring skyward, planning to end everything with a single strike. Glowing intensely, the young man braces for the fall. The protagonist crashes down, shattering the concrete and sending everything flying. They'll probably talk about this earthquake on the morning news. Amid the rubble, only yellow sparks remain and a glowing young man, with eyes full of thirst for revenge. Yugo coughs from the dust cloud. When the criminal looks forward, he realizes it was pointless to bring this whole army. The brute panics and tells the remaining henchmen to forget the original plan and use the secret weapon. Not feeling as strong as usual, the protagonist wonders if the cause might be the strange insects in his path. The crew starts putting on gas masks. Ken now strongly suspects it's their fault. Once again, the red gas spreads toward the hero. He quickly recognizes the substance and covers his nose with his arm. Mizukami says it would have been strange to face a monster with half-baked preparation. Wearing the biggest mask of them all, the monster points at the boy and tells him to just die already. Ken wonders if he's also using that special ammo. Yugo opens fire with a barrage of bullets per second. Most of the rounds fail to even reach the young man. Our hero notices the projectiles are regular ammunition, but strangely powerful. Ken takes cover among the debris he caused, but suddenly a masked superhuman appears. The young man can't react in time and gets hit for the first time in 23. The impact drags his body across the ground for several meters. Beaten, our hero lies on the floor. Yugo yells for everyone to shoot without letting up. Amid the smoke and gunfire, the protagonist assumes a defensive stance. The attacks don't even tickle him. His plan is to try to recover his energy. Striking the ground with his leg, the protagonist channels his energy from the bottom up, and one by one, he eliminates his opponents in a single breath, until it's Yugo Mizukami's turn. The protagonist breaks the enemy's Nerf gun with a punch. The big guy goes flying, carried by a shockwave, and crashes onto the red smoke canisters. Ken rushes toward the final reckoning. This time, the young man sees it coming. The guy who ambushed him earlier reappears. The hero dodges the heavy hand. As the enemy charges another strike, Ken counters, making the man swallow his own gas mask. The guy is launched among shards of plastic. Our boy tosses the henchman's mask at Mizukami's feet. The red gas haze is starting to fade. Yugo stares at Yanajimoto in terror. The young man glares at the mobster with disdain, then steps toward the enemy, saying that for a last resort plan, he actually put in some effort. Not bad. The Yakuza seems not to grasp the situation and shoots in vain. Ken bothers to dodge only to humiliate him. The boy marches toward the man who won't stop firing. He gets so close that the glow of his aura lights up the enemy's face. Trembling hands reach for the trigger one last time. The criminal fires at point-blank range and asks why Ken just won't die. The boy catches the final bullet, smoke still rising from his hands, and drops the useless piece of metal. As they're seeing Ken for the first time, Yugo watches in horror. The protagonist asks if wearing a mask like that doesn't make it hard to breathe. The criminal's life flashes before his eyes, right before Ken crushes his face. The young man pulls back his fist, only to land another punch square in the eunuch's face. Our hero asks the Ninja Turtle if he's passed out yet, but Yugo can no longer form his sentence. Ken asks the man where all that bravado from earlier went. For a moment, the young man looks back. He makes it clear to everyone in the room that today he won't show mercy. Mizukami's henchmen understand the gravity of the situation. The protagonist searches the executive's jacket for something. Then Ken throws a blue pill on the ground. The boy asks if that wasn't supposed to be the antidote. To confirm his suspicion, the protagonist tosses the tranquilizer into a crowd of henchmen hyped up on stimulants. The men glance at each other, ready to fight to the death for the sedative. Ken is disappointed by the quality of his enemies. A hand from his blind spot crushes the tiny substance. Our hero stares at the owner of the arm in shock. Yugo tells the young man it's not over yet. The executive appears on the edge of madness, clearly having taken more of the crimson fluid than his body can handle. While the protagonist was distracted by the cracked-out henchman, Yugo was searching in his jacket for another substance. The big man finds the pill and grips it tightly. Still taking advantage of the young man's distraction, the mobster pops the stimulant into his mouth. The reaction is so violent his nose seems to grow back. Yugo Mizukami tells Ken Miyajimoto the fight isn't over yet. The man is completely hallucinating and possibly psychotic. The protagonist's first thought is just how stupid the guy is, because he could have chosen to die peacefully in his sleep. But Yugo blocks Ken's first attack. The opponent leaps away. As he begins to hulk out, the executive tells the young man that this is where the talking ends. Mizukami thinks he's crushing it with his new form, but Ken is anything but impressed. The guy is so pathetic he even dragged the hero's parents into it. The protagonist waits for the opponent to come in with his strike. Our hero dodges it with ease and counters with a hit to the face. Yugo tries again and Ken sidesteps, then quickly returns with another punch to the face. The big man uses the momentum of his fall to spin into a surprise counterattack. Ken winces from the pain. Soon, the two separate again. Our hero realizes that if he takes many more hits like that, things might get ugly. So the boy needs to finish him before his body fully adapts to the substance. The protagonist charges in like a bullet and lands a powered-up knee between the opponent's ribs. Yugo chokes and spits blood. The executive is thrown into a wall several meters away. The young man's strength is almost fully restored, but Ken can't believe what he's seeing. His enemy took so many boosters that he just keeps growing. A red pill falls to the floor. The hero realizes he threw his opponent into a car full of drugs. Yugo chews the pills like they're candy. His body begins to grow out of control. The executive becomes monstrously huge. He's definitely no longer human. The thing looks at Ken and declares itself to be Yugo Mizukami of the Seven Star Society, the man who alone gained control over both the underworld and the nation. He feels invincible. The hero senses a clear change in the enemy's presence because, let's be honest, Ken realizes things are about to get very difficult. In the blink of an eye, Yugo is standing in front of Yanajimoto. The protagonist senses the incoming strike, just in time to block it with his arms, getting launched by the impact. Our hero crashes through a wall. The structure collapses on top of him. Mizukami approaches the crouched young man. The monster is already counting on victory. The boy stays still as the villain closes in. With his power raised to level 3, the criminal feels like a god. Then Yugo admits he now understands the protagonist's arrogance. For him, everyone else looks like insects. Mizukami wants to make Ken his first insect specimen. The boy moves among the debris. Our hero stands up, saying that hurt a bit, and begins channeling his energy. The monster tells the young man to stop lying to himself. Ken realizes Yugo misunderstood something. Glowing brighter than ever, the young man asks if the mobster really thought his power was just level 3. Before the man can protest, he's pierced. His arm ends up somewhere. Turns out Ken had passed right through him, taking his arm in the process. The protagonist looks back at his opponent. Yugo screams, clutching his shoulder. The boy reminds the criminal that he warned him earlier. He would split him in two with his bare hands. The monster then goes into denial. He gathers strength within himself and screams for everyone to hear that his story doesn't end like this. The beast grows into arm, and that's it. Ken analyzes just how far the power of the substance can go. Yugo vanishes for a second, and soon he's face to face with the protagonist. He tries to land a blow but gets blocked. Ken counters by creating a new belly button on his opponent. It's clear the hole in the enemy's stomach is almost healed. Ken realizes the opponent's regeneration is too fast and he'll have to use a power he didn't want to. The monstrous Yugo charges at the boy with everything he's got and hits him like a meteor, but our guy catches him with both hands. Ken says that if the man's in such a hurry, fine by him, but warns there's no turning back now. The protagonist's hands begin to glow as he tells Mizukami that if he doesn't want to die, he'll have to endure. Our hero unleashes a power so intense it could blind anyone. His chest becomes a beacon, and an explosion bursts from within him. Yugo braces himself to turn into ashes. The battlefield is now completely still. In the middle of a crater, we see the protagonist and a black smear. The name of the black smear is Yugo Mizukami. By some miracle, the man is still alive, though in a state of shock. Yugo wonders just how overpowered the protagonist really is. Then the villain starts convulsing on the ground. Ken observes that as a side effect of the attack, the man is being destroyed and regenerating at the same time. Mizukami hits his pinky toe on the edge of some debris. The enemy tries to grip the ground to withstand the agony. Motionless, the protagonist continues to watch. Yugo insults the protagonist and tells him to just kill him already. Ken kneels beside the criminal and says that's not how it works, because what Mizukami is asking for is a reward, and rewards are given to those who do good things. The boy offers the opponent a chance to be a good boy in exchange for a truthful answer. The bloodshot eyes of the man in agony turn to Ken. Yugo chooses to tell Ken that the people in the northern country are probably using her as a test subject now, earning himself a good kick to the face. The young man reminds him who's in charge and tells him to stop spouting nonsense. Still, the criminal chooses to laugh. Mizukami assumes the young man must think the 7-star society only has K as a backer. Even in his pathetic condition, the man says the protagonist is nothing more than another fish in the sea, and warns that if he messes with them, Ken will meet a fate worse than his. The criminal says not to think the people around him will stop suffering, and that his foolish revenge ends here. Getting no response, Yugo asks the boy if he's finally decided to finish him off. The young man stomps on his remaining hand like it's a scorpion. Mizukami didn't know it was possible to feel more pain. Ken explains that this is the reward for what he chose to say. The protagonist rises like a god and confesses to Yugo that he's the first to witness what's about to happen, then channels all that energy into his index finger and taps the enemy on the forehead. As Ken's power hits him, Mizukami realizes he never really knew anything about the boy, and implodes into several beams of light. The man ceases to exist from the inside out. Inside a suspicious-looking building, Ken knocks down yet another door. The boy worries he might be too late. Some time ago, he interrogated a conscious henchman about Aki, and the thug said she was on the 2nd floor, but that the protagonist had to hurry. The young man asked why the rush, and found out that Yugo Mizukami had ordered the girl to be eliminated if everything went south. Ken opens the final door and sees a massive man standing beside a woman. The young man freezes as he senses the man's presence. But as the stranger turns, he reveals himself to be the national security representative, and Aki is behind him. The man says Ken's arrival was expected. Relief rushes through the boy's body. The girl runs to him and wraps him in a hug. Even so, she complains that he took too long and she was really scared. Ken's eyes show a trace of guilt. Our hero strokes her head and apologizes. He really should have arrived sooner. The protagonist realizes that, without meaning to, he already chose to put his revenge above her safety. He holds the girl close to him and can only think about how selfish he is. Aigana Koji reveals Yugo Mizukami's death without any suspense. For a moment, the table falls silent. Tomo Kanzaki is the first to speak, saying she never should have left that task in the hands of an idiot. Manhwa Kaneda believes it was inevitable and says that as long as Ken Yanagimoto was alive, that confrontation was bound to happen. Kazuki Kondo adds that even now, they still need to eliminate Yanagimoto. The blonde woman seems to be the only one treating the situation with the seriousness it deserves. Saki tells the rest of the table that Ken is the root of this entire conflict. Then the blonde stands and confronts them all, asking if by any chance they've forgotten what happened. If they've forgotten how they managed to save everyone last time and why they're now trying to twist reality. Aigana Koji grows irritated with her outburst. The secretary grabs the girl by the collar and tells her that if she doesn't like it, she can sit quietly in the corner of the room. Since all Saki is good for is trembling in her boots, Atsushi says it's his turn to play the hero, and now he's the one tasked with killing the protagonist, so the others shouldn't forget to report back to Kei as well. Kazuki tells the secretary not to stress. He gets it. Their current top priority is dealing with Yugo's faction, especially now that the mafia from the eastern country has had their eyes on them ever since the crisis began. The sun shines, illuminating the exterior of a building. A beautiful katana and its sheath are displayed near the window. Seated, a man with a scar from ear to ear asks if it's true that Yugo is dead, and whether the thug named his successor before kicking the bucket. A man standing replies that you can't trust almost anyone in the underworld. The seated man then asks who activated the 7-star sword, and the blonde guy responds that it was someone named Ken Yanagimoto. Nanami Ishida, listening in, is stunned. The girl immediately recognizes the name. Then the boss asks if that wasn't the guy who gained a reputation in Japan a while back, and if it's the same guy who stirred up trouble at the university recently. Nanami confirms the incident she witnessed. Putting out his cigarette, the boss reflects. Then the man with the scar says he'll combine both incidents into a single investigation. From now on, Nanami is in charge of tracking Yanagimoto and gathering intel, and even killing him if she deems it necessary. We return to the Yanagimoto crater scene. Emergency responders have arrived at the location. A man opens the car door for Aki Kuniyama and tells her not to worry, her mother is going to be fine. The young woman's mother was also rescued successfully. National defense personnel investigate the area wearing hazmat suits. Investigators also discovered what appear to be the remains of Yugo Mizukami. Ken doesn't like the scene one bit, so the young man asks if, even with society in chaos, it's okay to hide a slaughterhouse like that. The committee representative stays silent for a few seconds. Ryuji explains that places like that have existed for a long time, but lately they've gotten out of control. The substance known as the nectar of the gods. A low-quality nectar causes many side effects and only minor physical enhancements. But a perfect nectar supposedly has no side effects, and rumors say the substance grants an immortal body. And many people, enchanted by the rumor, are chasing after it. Even the leadership of the most powerful corporation in the world, TS, has intensified the search for nectar. Ken concludes that if that's the case, then everyone's after any information they can find. There's no telling what might happen to Aki, since she was at Yumo's side. But the security committee promises to prepare a safe shelter for the young woman. The representative promises to keep her identity secret and protect her well-being. Curious, Ryuji asks the hero if he knows what the privileged nectar actually does. The protagonist evades the question and suggests they should probably collect some DNA samples. However, when the young man tries to walk past, the national security leader blocks his way. Ryuji comments that the more powerful the individual, the greater the results they tend to produce. Yanagimoto laughs at the man with disdain. The protagonist asks if the leader is asking for a DNA donation or something like that. As the tension rises, the young man and the big guy stare each other down. Some of the security committee's subordinates begin approaching the scene. Ryuji reveals that he would like the protagonist to receive security and protection within the headquarters of the National Security Committee. The young man asks if the proposal is really just about security and protection. The representative simply stares at him with a serious look. Without beating around the bush, the man says the committee knows the boy's body isn't in perfect condition, and pleads with him to go through surgery, even if it's just for Ms. Kuniyama and her daughter. Our hero feels uneasy, wondering if people will always use those he cares about against him. The buzz of his phone makes him wonder if it's already begun. Ken checks the notification on his phone. Some members of the security committee have started a video call for Aki, who's celebrating her birthday. Our hero is left speechless. The protagonist can't believe how innocent the situation is. Ryuji explains that he found out earlier that it was the girl's birthday, so he arranged a little cake and some decorations. Ken feels relieved and asks the man to be more straightforward next time. Ryuji apologizes and says that's just how he is. The young man advises the older guy to try smiling more. So the representative gives it a shot, and ends up with a smile worthy of a serial killer's biography cover. The young man says maybe it's best to just skip it. The protagonist then accepts the invitation to the headquarters. Our hero remembers he promised to cooperate and figures it wouldn't hurt to check on his physical condition too. Ken asks Ryuji if he has a training room on the premises of the headquarters. The chief confirms and tells the hero he'll instruct the staff to set the difficulty to maximum. The protagonist is satisfied. Looks like Ryuji already gets it. As big as a football stadium, the headquarters building has 10 floors. The young man walks calmly toward his destination. He stops in front of a door and knocks twice. A voice from inside tells him to come in. Aki is happy to see the protagonist. Ken asks if the girl is doing okay and how her mother's health is. The young woman says her mom is still in the hospital and asks why the boy came by. Our hero sits beside her and confesses he came to apologize but also wanted to check on her. Aki tells him he doesn't need to apologize. It was her who said she was fine when he found her. But the boy feels it's his fault that she and someone else ended up dragged into the situation, and he thanks his friend for staying strong and continuing to support him. The girl reveals that she wasn't always so careful, but she always gave her best to make sure neither of them got hurt. She clenches her fist tightly and confesses that even then, it wasn't easy at all. When she found out her mother had been kidnapped, Aki even blamed the protagonist for what had happened. Countless thoughts ran through her head as she endured the weight. The girl falls silent for a second, her eyes filled with hopelessness. Aki never imagined that death, or even just getting hurt, could be so terrifying. And if the worst had happened and Ken was caught in the chaos, she wouldn't have been able to do anything. Ken remains quiet as he listens to his friend lament about not being strong enough. The young man recalls the look on her face the last time they parted. And a second later, Aki breaks down and confesses it was all a lie. The protagonist watches her with compassion and thinks that while he put both of them in danger, Aki didn't give up on anything and never let go of the thread. And deep down, she's probably stronger than he is. Nanami walks through the streets of Tokyo. Then the young woman turns a corner and suddenly comes to a stop. The sword had admired the horizon and ends up talking to herself. Nanami looks around and takes in her surroundings. Standing before her is the massive building of the National Security Committee headquarters. Aki says goodbye to Yanajimoto and tells him she'll get in touch in the future. The young man smiles at the girl and waves. Both women have changed their identities and are under the committee's protection. It's not ideal, but it was the best Ryuji Otsuka could do. And above all, the young man truly wishes neither of them had to get involved with him. Ken is already ready to talk business. Turning his back, the boy asks what Nanami is doing there. The young woman replies that she's there as a representative of an international alliance with the security committee. Our hero then asks why she came to see him. Nanami replies that she completely understands if he feels suspicious. Ken thinks about the watchdog's audacity. They stare at each other, but remain silent. The protagonist tells the girl to do whatever she wants, because even if he tells her to leave, she'll keep following him anyway. Nanami is shocked when the boy says it seems like talking won't get through to her. She runs after him, begging him to take it back. Ken decides to take advantage of the situation to try to get information out of the foreigner too. The protagonist heads to the training room at the National Security Committee headquarters, and Ryuji asks if he wants to start right away. The young man stretches his arm to warm up a little, and says to the people behind the glass that standing still will just make him slow. Ken then stretches his long arms a bit more. The system announces the start of challenge level 20 and preps heavy artillery. Several machine guns fire in the hero's direction. As he activates his powers, the boy concludes that he didn't just gain information from the battle with Yugo. Ken then destroys the obstacles one by one while analyzing his body, and concludes that after studying the venom's composition, he's now immune. The system announces the start of challenge level 30 and rows of weapons rise from the floor. Ken relaxes his hands and positions them in parallel, and since his body never stopped healing, his metamorphosis is now complete. The light coming from the young man's hands blinds everyone nearby. Nanami asks what all that light means. However, when it fades, she can see perfectly. The boy left behind a trail of melted wreckage from an energy blast. But our hero barely broke a sweat. Ken complains that he's still getting used to using the new power. Nanami asks if it's normal for superhumans to display such amazing abilities without making any effort. Ryuji replies, kind of. While it's true that level 3 gifted individuals have incredible powers called authorities, some authorities are easy to understand, and others are so complex that even their principles are hard to grasp. The representative says he doesn't even know what level the demonstrated ability belongs to. But one thing is certain, out of all the superhumans the man has ever met, the protagonist is by far the strongest. Ryuji wonders whether the young man might have reached level 4 or even beyond. But beyond level 4 lies the realm of gods, so it's too early to say. From inside the room, Ken says that if it's over, he's heading out. On the mic, a representative explains there's not much more that can be measured. The young man heads up to the observation room. Our hero arrives already asking for the results. The chief says they were able to measure his physical abilities, but anything beyond that became way too complicated. Ken responds that he's fine with that. Nanami asks if she can use the training room too, and the protagonist throws a look her way. With a determined expression, the girl looks serious about the request. The chief says it's no problem, but for level 2 individuals, difficulty level 10 is more appropriate. The young woman stomps her foot and asks for level 30 difficulty. Then she removes the sword from her waist and politely asks Ryuji to set it to the maximum difficulty. The representative objects, saying she wouldn't make it out without serious injuries, but Ken tells him to let her do what she wants. The executive is caught off guard, but Ken nods and gives off the sense that everything will be fine. The system announces the start of level 30 difficulty training, and the girl walks quickly into the room. Nanami braces her sword and waits for the machines. And then the girl had to be hospitalized, bandaged head to toe, and hooked up to an IV. The protagonist is angry. He knew it wouldn't be a walk in the park, but he also didn't expect her to get that wrecked. He tells the swordswoman she's the kind of person who only learns through pain. Nanami lowers her head in shame, but quickly tells the chief that next time she'll stick to level 10. Ken tells the girl to take a break, but the young woman says she's fine and even starts removing the tubes. In real battles, no one will go easy on her just because she's injured. It's necessary to be used to facing threats, even in this state. She adds that she has a reason to get stronger. The protagonist cuts her off with a good old whack to the head. Nanami falls to the side with a bump on her head, and the young man says she's very noisy. Ryuji lifts the girl from the ground in his arms. He gently places her on the bed and says he understands how she feels. Everyone wishes they were stronger. The man wonders if becoming a superhuman truly solves all his problems. Faced with such sincerity, our hero is left speechless. Ken looks closely at the committee representative and remembers that the man had level 2 abilities. The young man concludes that making the big guy an ally will be useful in the future. Ryuji dismisses Ken to go about his day and says he'll send him the instructions for using the headquarters facilities later. However, the young man tells the representative that if he has nothing better to do, he should follow him. The chief is confused by the invitation, but the protagonist soon explains that he has a gift for the big guy for taking care of Aki. Ryuji and Ken sit side by side on a yoga mat. The back of the National Committee representative is massive. The protagonist brings his palm close to the man's spine. Ken confesses he expected the man's muscles and internal organs to be in less than perfect condition. But Ryuji's body is already an absurdity. The young man explains that to gain power, a price of equal value must be paid. Offering to reconstruct the chief's body from the inside out, the protagonist asks if he thinks he can withstand the pain. Ryuji reflects silently on the question. There were few superhumans in the National Security Committee. The representative begins to recall the past. He confesses that every mission was nearly impossible, and even when faced with the worst situations, nothing made Ryuji happier than witnessing a mission completed successfully. Such deep admiration that he would give up everything to be like them. But he always had to deal with many regrets. Even failing to become a superhuman, he could never stop wanting to be one. The man confesses that after all this time, he thought his heart had given up. Ken asks if Ryuji doesn't value his own life. The representative explains that when he says he'd give up everything, his life isn't included, it holds very little value. That was the answer our hero needed to hear. Ken focuses the energy in his body into his right palm and presses it against the man's back. Ryuji feels a supernova dissipating through his body starting from the diaphragm. Then the representative suppresses a scream of unimaginable pain. The executive falls to the ground as his body begins to glow. As if his body were being split apart, the man screams. The bedroom door opens, and the protagonist steps out of the room. A voice asks him how the process went. Ken sees Nanami waiting outside. The young man asks if the girl is okay now, and she replies that it wasn't anything serious. Our hero doubts that's the truth. The swordswoman changes the subject and asks how the director is doing. The protagonist replies that the chances of success are low and the risks are high. Nanami asks if she could become superhuman using the same method. Ken looks sternly at the girl. Then the young man begins explaining that Ryuji Atsuka is a man close to the realm of the awakened, a situation completely different from the girl's. Interfering with the representative's body is like rebuilding a few steps he left behind, while Nanami needs to build her staircase from scratch, which she isn't doing. Try and get strong at the speed the girl wants requires paying a much higher price. Our hero finishes his reasoning by advising the girl to master the basics, but the protagonist feels bad and wonders if he was too harsh. Nanami now looks utterly disheartened like a little puppy. Ken can't ignore the girl's suffering. Our hero asks the swordswoman why she wants to get stronger, and asks if it's an order from her superiors, catching the girl's attention. Then Nami says she wants to get stronger for personal reasons. The young woman reminds the boy of the time they talked about the supposed key that would be needed during the calamity. She confesses she believes the key is connected to the disaster. All the swordswoman thinks about is finding a way to end the calamity, or at least find a clue to its origin. Ken realizes the girl's motives are serious. The protagonist tells the girl that they're not in the right place to discuss this topic. Then the young man begins to walk away, but not before asking Nanami to follow him. Hirokirin says no, she doesn't want to and she doesn't like it. The woman reaches for a cup of tea, and then she asks the person she's speaking with what they intend to do if the key becomes useless. Herms confirms with the woman that the name she goes by at the university is Hirokirin. Then the mysterious young man tries to convince her to understand. The key requires definitive growth, and at the moment, growth is happening too slowly. And the beautiful woman should already know that Soleno will soon make his own move. Hirokirin comments that the child is very impatient, and admits that Herms has said enough, but there's a catch. She can't trust someone who lies as easily as they breathe. The informant says his ideas are not lies, just adjustments to the plan, and mentions it seems like the woman is enjoying herself. Hirokirin reflects on what the young man said, then laments that impulsive actions are making the plan lose its footing. Eventually, the situation will become boring. Herms laughs, unsure of what to think. Then the informant asks the woman if she feels like he's standing in her way. He says that in stories, the hero awakens their powers when the most important person to them is in danger. Then he shows Hirokirin a photo of Awa next to Ken, reminding her that the protagonist owes him a favor. It's a beautiful day outside the cafe. A well-dressed man waits alone at a table with 4 seats. But soon, someone approaches. Man looks up to see who's coming. Ayanokoji straightens his posture and greets. The young woman who just arrived is Oi Miyahara. The reporter smiles awkwardly and stares at the man sitting at the table.
Guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, please leave a comment in the comment section. Also subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Like the video and share it too. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.